Hello, everybody. My name is Lat Mackey, and this is Games Done Classic, the premiere episode. Welcome, everybody. Thank you for being here. Games Done Classic is a look back at legendary GDQ moments with the people that made them happen, and this is the first episode. Thank you all so much for being here. If you are watching this on YouTube and would like to support the live content we're doing, please consider checking out our Twitch channel at twitch.tv/gamesdonequick. If you have an Amazon Prime account, you can subscribe to any Twitch channel of your choice every month for free. Please consider using your Prime gaming account to support our weekly GDQ hotfix content that you are watching right now. Ladies and gentlemen, this show is brought to you by people like you. All of you all out there at home watching, thank you for making this show and all of the other GDQ shows happen. Really do appreciate it. Have a couple of quick announcements here before we get into what this show is and what everything that is going on. So first off, we just wrapped up Fleet Fatales. What an amazing speed run all women event that wrapped up yesterday. If you missed any of the runs, you can go to the youtube.com/quick Games Done Quick to check out all the VODs. Pretty exciting announcement. Fleet Fatales made over $81,000 during their charity marathon to support the Malala Fund. Really awesome stuff. If you get a chance, there are some really amazing runs. Please do yourself a favor and check out all of them. Some of my favorites are some of the rhythm stuff that happened at the middle of the event. Really cool stuff. Another quick announcement, AGDQ 2020 is just 2021. AGDQ 2021 is just around the corner, January 3rd. A quick announcement, if you're a runner, you should have received an email this past week with instructions that are required to be followed by November 23rd, no later than midnight Eastern time. So if you are a runner for the AGDQ 2021 event, please check your email and follow those instructions as soon as you possibly can. If not, you may be dropped from the schedule. So please contact committee@gamesdonequick.com immediately if you have not received an email. So, what is Games Done Classic? Well, we're going to be looking back at some awesome moments and amazing moments that have happened throughout the over 10-year history now of Games Done Quick. Who am I? My name's Lat Mackey. I am maybe like an uber super fan of the Games Done Quick events and marathons that have happened throughout the past. And I gotta say, I think the first time I saw the live stream of it was probably 2015, even though I had seen some of the VODs earlier on, 13, 14, things like that. And I immediately fell in love with some of these amazing runs that I saw of games that I played as a kid and could not believe that they were played at this level. Mitch Flowerpower doing the wrong warp in Super Mario Bros. 3 was just like, my head almost exploded watching a glitch like that. Pro J&, watching Zelda 2, a game that I found super challenging as a child. Seeing Pro J&, just absolutely destroy the game pretty much got me hooked instantly. The thing that really got me hooked was some of the charitable aspects of the Games Done Quick event. And how they're really doing gaming for good. And as a person, I've worked for a very long time in the nonprofit and charitable space. So these are causes that are really near and dear and true to my heart. And so seeing these amazing gamers do amazing things for amazing people, man, I just hit me right in all the feels. And I got hooked instantly. I didn't get a chance to start speedrunning until about 2017. And at SGDQ 2018 and 19, I've been fortunate enough to actually have some runs in the event. I also had a run at GDQX 2019. I'm primarily like a TurboGrafx 16 speedrunner. If you've never heard of the TurboGrafx 16, don't worry, you're not alone. But it's very much a passion of mine, and I am glad we get a chance here to all hang out, sit on the virtual couch, and watch some runs together. So, how's this whole thing going to start? Well, obviously, I think for the first ever, the premiere episode, we need to welcome back some of the runners who made the first classic Games Done Quick possible, way back when in 2010. So, with no further ado, I would like to welcome the man, the person who started this whole thing, Mike Uyama, and then runners. Mike actually had runs as well. He's a runner as well. But then also Andrew G. and Frezzy Man, all different time zones. We're all here together in one space. Welcome, everybody. Thank you so much for being here and doing this. Hello, everyone. How you guys doing?
I'm doing good.
Good. Doing well.
Awesome. Okay, everyone's unmuted. This is great. We are ready to go. So before we get into some of the runs and watching some of the things that we're going to be watching today, I'd like to take us all back a little bit. And Mike, I'm going to ask you to set the stage a bit and really, how did this idea of this charity speedrunning event even start? Where did this whole thing come about?
Well, back in 2009, there were basically two events, video game charity fundraising events, and they were Desert Bus for Hope and the Speed Gamers, who ironically were not speedrunners, but they would basically focus on a series and play through them, and fundraise for charity that way. And we looked at both of these events and we're like, oh, we can do this. We want to do this. And so, and being speedrunners, we're like, we can do this better because we can do this fast. It turns out that it was a lot harder than we thought it was. And I definitely respect both groups for what they do. But that was kind of where the idea came from. And now, while speedrunning, marathons, raising money for charity, it's pretty common nowadays. Back then, it was in 2009, it was unheard of.
So I've had a chance to hang out and get to meet some of the people who made the first one even possible, the runners and the participants and the people behind the scenes. Can you tell us a little bit about what was the speedrunning community like at the time? Were there leaderboards? How did you all know who was putting up what times for what game and things like that?
There were no leaderboards. Putting runs up on YouTube was not that common in 2009, even though YouTube was a thing in 2009. Really, the majority of the speedrunning community was in Speed Demos Archive. And while not too many people use that site nowadays, it was basically the source for speedrunning back in 2009. Speedruns Live just had 3 or so races in 2009. So speedrunning races wasn't really much of a thing back then. And speedrun.com just simply did not exist.
It's kind of amazing because I got a chance to talk with Frezzyman about this. Frezzyman, first off, I know you were running a ton of games back in those late aughts of the 2000s, but the process you mentioned of how you'd have to submit your run. First of all, tell us where you are in the world, and then how would you submit your speed runs back in those days?
So I am a Swede, so live in Sweden, and when the 2D games were submitted, I think in about the first videos, probably 2004. The first years, it was very common that you were recording your run with an VHS tape or VCR tape in US. So my first run, I think it was Mega Man 3, 2005, and I recorded my first runs with the VHS tape. And I think I was one of the few or first European runners I was shipping one tape at the time to Nathan Yankee in Texas. So it was a post package, and I sent it there, and he was good enough to translate it into get things digital and into the site. So
capture it.
Yeah, just capture it. Andrew, I know, thankfully, we have a lot of your runs because you've recorded them. What made you even think about recording one of your runs early on?
I've always liked the Super Mario Brothers games and Nintendo games in general. So, when I was I don't know, maybe 13, 14, I stumbled upon some speedruns and I thought, is it possible to record this? How do you do that? And I just hooked up a VCR and it does work. That's really easy. You just hook up a VCR to a TV and hit record. And so I eventually found my way to Speed Demos Archive after being on Twin Galaxies for a year or so. And I was like, oh, these guys are really cool. This is a dedicated speedrun website, and it was cool to find that and be able to actually submit my run somewhere.
Mike, if you don't mind, tell us, when did you get involved with SDA, and was there any evolution? How did the site go how did they change? How did they start accepting and doing the speedrunning thing as well?
So I got involved in 2004, which was the start of Speed Demos Archive, when they started accepting games outside of Quake, because originally it was a Quake speedrunning site, and the reason why it has demos in the name is because of the demo files from Quake that they would use to record their records, because back in the late 90s and early 2000s, capture equipment was not common, and it was also expensive, and it was a lot more difficult to do than it is nowadays, where it's pretty easy to do and affordable.
pretty cool. I know it's interesting because a lot of SDA still exists. The forums and like you can actually start looking back through some of the history of all of this actually still today. It's kind of interesting.
That was one of the ways I did my research now, to just try to remember everything. Like all these forum topics is still there, so it's great to do some research.
Yeah, when I did my Classic Games Done Quick panel, I had to look at some of the original threads, and they were still there. They were a little difficult to find, but I did find them, and I was able to kind of remember some things that I said and see some things that I said that I completely did not remember at all. And since you were asking about the evolution of the site of SDA, it's really just like accepting more and more types of runs, and I guess being more flexible in rulings. Like, even though, a lot of the basic stuff of speedruns, like, the any percent, low percent, and 100%, that comes from, SDA. It's called RTA now, but it used to be called single segment when it came to doing runs all in one session. And now with live streaming, that's kind of more expected because, it's not it's not as entertaining, and it doesn't really flow as well to constantly be saving and loading one segment of a run when you're streaming nowadays, and it doesn't really work that well for a marathon either.
Well, so this is fascinating. And one of the things that we are fortunate enough to have nowadays is this really easy communication platforms. We can share strategies, we can share videos, we can help each other out in a way that who would have thought, 10 or 15 or 20 years ago would have even been possible. Andrew, I'm going to throw this one over to you. I know you're primarily known for a lot of Mario games, but you were speedrunning a bunch of games before I even knew speedruns existed. Are these things that you were developing yourselves, or were you able to share any strats or anything with your runs with anybody else, or is this something you were doing on your own?
I mostly, as far as strategy goes, I mostly like they were saying, use the Speed Demos Archive forums, and it's basically you would put up a run and you would be speedrunning a game, and you'd just make a thread and be like, does anyone speedrun this?
I mean, this is kind of hard to think of nowadays, but because now the biggest communities of speedrunners have hundreds or even 1,000 plus runners. But back in the days of SDA, if your run, if the game that you ran had more than one runner, then that was a pretty big game, because usually the speedrunning community was pretty small, and even popular games would only have maybe a couple of runners. So things were much smaller back then. And sometimes people be like, our community is tiny, we only have 5 active runners. I'm like, that's pretty good.
Sometimes you put threads up and get no response too, and it'd just be like, okay, I guess I'll just figure this out myself.
I can add that it was a big frustration in some games that there was no run for it, and no one was discussing any runs either. So I probably was one of the first did a bounty on some games. So I think, Andrew, did I actually ended up paying you for the werewolf run on NES?
Yeah, we put up a werewolf, the last warrior for NES bounty, for someone to do a speed run on it, and I just happened to see the game at a game store that I visited, and I was like, oh, I guess I'll try this. And I actually really ended up enjoying the game, and ended up even doing a task of it eventually. It was just funny because it's like, oh, there's a bounty here. This is great.
It's making me chuckle too, from saying that you had to find a game at a game store, because flashcards weren't a thing at this time, I'm assuming, in the mid 2000s.
No.
Right.
If they existed, then they were not commonplace at all, and I don't think they existed back in the late 2000s or early 2010s.
So then I'm curious, Andrew and Frezzy and Mike, because you were speedrunning at the same time. How would you practice? If would you just have to play the game the whole way through, or is there another way to break the game and make it possible to actually do some practice?
It depended on the game, but I would frequently use an emulator to practice, and which didn't always translate 100% because emulators back then weren't as accurate, so they wouldn't always correctly emulate the lag and stuff like that.
Right.
But that did help. If it was, like a more modern game with like a saving system, then I would just, practice the levels that way. But yeah, there was no like a flashcard practice and,
Right.
with, all their save states, all of their conveniences that really help out for today's runs. And practice ROMs definitely didn't exist back then. The practice ROM was just, if you could emulate it, then great.
And one question there: you had like input lag in your controllers as well when you was practicing, right?
On emulator, probably. I didn't really pay that much attention to it.
Okay.
For me, I hate using emulators just because of the input lag. I've never had a lot of luck with that. So for me, I always basically I would just take a game and be like, how do I get a lot of lives in this game, and then rack up a ton of lives and like go to certain segments and try to get good at certain parts. I did that I remember doing that with Mario too, because there was no way to really practice the later stages without just like pulling up a bunch of lives. That was basically the only thing I could think to do.
That's actually not a bad idea. Gotta love the 2005 strats where you had to just live up, get some continues, and go play that level a bunch of times. So that brings up another interesting point. As we're starting to move towards the first live event ever, how many different games were you all? I mean, would you all speedrun a bunch of different games, or do you have games that you were just kind of focusing on in the late 2000s, around 2009, 2010 time? Mike, I'll start with you. Were you running a lot of games, or?
2009, I think the only game that I ran like 2 games in 2009, and I think it was Sunset Riders and Contra 3.
Nice.
But when it came to classic games done quick, and I can go into more detail later, I ran somewhere around like 10 games for it, and they were just games I had ran throughout the years.
Got it. Okay. And then Frezzy?
It's the same here. I think I found the old schedule for the marathon, and I was attempting 16 runs for the marathon. I think was the plan.
I think you did 15 runs.
15.
You definitely did the most runs.
Yeah, and it's I was not only like running the games I had the record for. I was also doing some casual speed runs for some games. So maybe we'll come to that later. But when we were planning the marathon, like many players wanted to see like the popular games, and we didn't have any like. The world record holder will not be there, so I said that, hey, I can run that game in this time, and I can run this game in this time, and it ended up that they wanted to see Metroid and Mega Man 2 and other games. So yeah, it was what it was. Like my practice hours before the marathon was not that great in all the games, but yeah, a lot of games.
Andrew,
I remember you pulled an all-nighter practicing all of your games like in a row or something like that. Like right.
Sorry, I lost you there. What did you say, Mike?
Oh, I remember you pulled an all-nighter, like practicing all of your games in a row.
Sounds like
classic games done quick.
Yeah.
Andrew, how about you?
I did a lot of runs also. I just remember. Yeah, it was kind of like, what games can people run, and other popular games that people are interested in. And I just remember doing like F-Zero and what else did I even do? Marble Madness. And anyway, I did a whole bunch of games, and I remember like I put in a lot of practice in these games, but for the marathon, not all of them went all that well. But it was a lot of fun.
So, Mike, if you wouldn't mind, as we're starting to move towards this very first event, to my understanding, there really hadn't been a place where speedrunners had gotten together, like in real life. That kind of thing hadn't happened. Am I mistaken, or could you at least set the scene a little bit for having an event like this?
You're mostly not mistaken. We had only met once before, at MagFest the year previous, at the beginning of 2009. And that's why we originally wanted Classic Games Done Quick to be at MagFest, because, it was a fairly big convention. Not as big as it is today, but it was still fairly big back then. We thought they would have the resources to help us pull off an event. But yeah, for the most part, you're right. We only had one meetup in person before then. It's not commonplace like they are nowadays, whether it's a GDQ or like other smaller events like Midwest Speed Fest and stuff and the like.
Absolutely. And I'm curious how you were able to contact or recruit runners. I'll first ask you, Mike, how you sent out the thing that this was happening. And then I'm curious about how Andrew and Frezzy possibly even heard about this thing to go do some speedruns at.
Well, as mentioned before, everything happened on Speed Demo's archive. So it was just all in the forums. And I remember I just come back home from vacation, and like a lot of people wanted to do a charity event, but it was very not focused, and people were just suggesting the games they could run, and like there was no consideration whether they wanted to be in person or like a remote or anything like that. So I decided it needed more focus, and I decided on classic games, hence the name Classic Games Done Quick, mainly because I felt like that was our strong suit at the time. Like we had a lot of good 8 and 16-bit runners, especially here in the States. So I figured that would be best for our focus. And at the time I decided we should do it at MagFest because, as I said before, lots of resources we had met there before.
Makes sense. Andrew, I'll start with you. First of all, it sounds like you may have heard about this in the forums, but what made you decide to get involved?
Yeah. So I saw it on the forums. I saw a few different people suggesting some sort of marathon or meetup. And it seemed like a lot of fun. I mean, I watched all these guys speedruns, and I was like, this would be great to meet these people, and share that hobby. And I was just like, I was really excited to meet everyone and to talk about games with people. And the fact that it was like, oh, this is like for charity. Like, oh, that seems cool. I could do a little traveling, do this, and have some fun. And I never thought it would turn into what it is now.
No one did.
I talked to a lot of you guys, Freddie, Mike. I talked to a lot of people on the forums, and so it was cool to finally meet a lot of you guys live in person.
And then, Frezzy, man, it kind of blows me away even more that you decided to fly over an ocean just to do a speedrunning event. How did you? What's kind of your story to get you there?
For some years, you are pretty much like living in the forum, or like you watch it too much for your own good and reading the news and all these threads, and you're so much into running these games, and you talk with like many other runners, but you never see their faces. And I think that the first MagFest week meetup we had, it was I didn't hesitate to come over like right away, like I'm going. So I think it was a lot of US runners, and it was me from Europe, if I recall correctly. So I just spent some time in Mike's basement, and we were practicing some games. We went to MagFest, and we had a lot of fun there. And I can mention that as well. We had a showcase there for SDA for like
we
showed the many runs on a big screen, I think. So it was just great to meet everyone and discuss these games more in depth, so to say. We had a lot in common. So. It was a great time. And the second time when the marathon was showing up, it was like I couldn't go there. My wife was pregnant, and many things was going on in my life. But it felt like I can't miss this thing. So I think I think if I recall correctly, it was me from Europe, and it was Mike from Australia, and the rest was US runners.
No, there was also I think his name is also Mike. Tigger 77. He's from Germany, so yeah, he was there for the classic games done quick, and yeah, he pulled off a really good Link's Awakening run. So yeah.
There's a funny comment in the chat because this is, I think this is very much reminiscent of the time. Remember watching those QuickTime videos? You would have to share QuickTime videos back and forth sometimes too, because I mean, YouTube started to be around then, but not much. You know, there wasn't a lot of YouTube at the time as well.
Yeah. Like we were not about YouTube. Like when you mentioned VODs, that was just how it was expected. You downloaded the video directly from Speed Demo's archive. Like, YouTube, why would you use that? The quality isn't that great. And of course, like now YouTube quality is, just fine. And, it's like the expected way to watch a VOD now.
So before we get into watching the runs and going down the stroll down memory lane, if you will, Mike, would you mind setting the stage a little bit? There's this somewhat infamous story, and folks, if you haven't yet, there's this great panel from AGDQ, I believe, 2019, where they do this whole panel on the story of classic games done quick, how it started. But where was the event originally scheduled? How did it end up where it did? Set the stage a little bit.
Okay, so to put things in perspective. Like live streaming was not really common at all in 2009. In fact, classic games done quick was streamed on Ustream and not Twitch because Twitch didn't exist. And what it was back then was Justin TV, which was frankly mostly known for like getting bootleg casts of like cartoons, like TV series and sports games.
Yeah, sports games. Yep, definitely a lot of sporting events.
I know a lot of people who watched like, NBA finals and like Super Bowls on Justin TV back in the day.
I have no idea what you're talking about. Never did that.
Yeah, exactly. That never happened. So, but the reason why I went with Ustream instead of Justin TV is that if you had over 1,000 viewers, and we thought this was going to be unlikely, but we knew we had a lot of people, like in Europe who wanted to, in our community. So if you had over 1,000 viewers, anyone from outside of the US after 1,000 viewers would start getting booted because either their servers outside of the US were not very good or they just didn't have servers outside of the US. So, so that's why we went with Ustream for our classic games done quick. And I think what Lat Mackey is alluding to is that, as I said before, the event was originally supposed to happen at MagFest. Well, very long story short, and after some very stressful transitions, it ended up being in my mother's basement because they did not have good internet at MagFest. If you want to know what the internet was, imagine an entire hotel that was basically on DSL internet that had maybe like half a megabit of upload. It was really bad. So
that would have taken a long time to pass around that QuickTime video. That's all I'm saying.
Exactly. So like when we started Classic Games Done Quick, and you're going to see this in some of the videos, we didn't have commentary set up at first because we had to transfer over all of our equipment to my house, and then we were already late because we didn't start until like 8 or 9 p.m. And we're supposed to start at 6, so we started like 2.5, 3 hours late when we started.
Oh, man. So then, Andrew, let's start with you. As a runner or a participant in this event, first of all, how many runs were you like scheduled to run? And then what's it like showing up and then, we're not where we're supposed to, what's going on? What's it like going through all that?
Yeah, I was so I was supposed to run like, I don't know, 10, 11 games, something like that. And we started the stream at MagFest. I was playing Mega Man, and I remember everyone's like, the video is just like still frames of jumping from like Elect Man, now it's Fireman.
Oh, yeah, I do remember that. Yeah, we did get a stream up and running. It was a slideshow, and I think you were on Gutsman's stage, and there are those platforms that go like this, except like it wasn't, smooth screen was like,
yeah, everyone's just basically like, this isn't working. So so I think Mike suggested like, we'll transfer it to his house. I was like, honestly, I was a little bit like I don't know. I don't really know. I know them, but I don't know them that well. Is this okay to do? I'm fine with being here at like a marathon with everyone, but like to go to this guy's house, I think it'll be all right. Like I know,
and if you're wondering,
I know these people, at least online. But I don't know.
Some stranger's house.
Yeah, exactly. And if you're wondering why it was like specifically there, where MagFest used to be, it was like a 10-minute drive or less away from my mother's house. So, it was not a long drive, even though it was very inconvenient because we had a bunch of people who were staying at the MagFest hotel because they were expecting to just, go down to the convention floor and run their game. So like we basically had a bunch of people, including me, do a bunch of shuttle service.
Oh man.
Back and forth from the hotel to make sure people could get there. And I remember, so the basement is not big and the floor and the ceiling is pretty low. Like it's about 6 feet tall. Like I'm a little under 6 feet and like I just barely don't hit.
Andrew, did you fit in there?
I think it was. I remember being a little cramped, but it seemed okay. It worked out.
And I know someone who bumped their head a couple of times, but I remember there's this video that has a bunch of people. This is like from right around or right before the marathon was starting. And it was people, saying that it was kind of like a doom and gloom video because it was not looking good for the marathon. And I remember Fresny Man says you can't have 10 people be there in the basement at once. It's too small or something like that. And what ended up happening is that there were 10 people in that room constantly, even though it was packed.
Nice and cozy.
Yeah.
I think you could probably be 15 people down there, but it was difficult to have the stream going on and people going out all the time and stuff like that. So,
So Mike, during the panel for the Classic Games Done Quick, shared some videos, some people who were shooting video, and so you have some memories of the moment. Fresny Man, every time you pop up in one of these videos, you got the smile on your face. You're pretty positive. Were you just rolling with it, or was this you just trying to get this thing going? It was really cool to see.
I think I am like that for most of the time, but also for me, it was difficult to speak English all the time and actually communicate. So I think it added up a little bit, to try to have some showtime at least to do something. I think
that's actually a really good. Were any of you streaming at this point? Have any of you ever streamed any of your speedruns? Andrew,
not any of us.
I streamed once or twice before CGDQ. But I wouldn't have streamed unless I knew this. It was only streamed because I knew this event. What we were going to have it, and I remember I streamed from a camcorder because I didn't have a capture card.
And then Andrew, had you ever done commentary over one of your runs? I guess that's what I'm trying to get at.
I think the only thing I had ever streamed back then was Donkey Kong for arcade, just the main capture and commentating on it, but it wasn't very good either. It was just awful. So no, this is kind of was the first streaming experience, I guess, for me.
I also think that if I can throw in something here, most of the old runs from the SDA is still you can still download them, most of them from archive.org.
That is true.
And some of the games for for example, my Super Mario 3 run, I put a lot of effort to do audio commentaries for it. So if you actually download the file, and you can choose both English and Swedish audio track to listen to while playing.
Oh, that's cool.
Yeah. I remember back then, if we did commentary, we did it after the run, because streaming wasn't really a thing. So we weren't really used to talking while doing our runs. I would say people didn't really get used to that until about AGDQ 2012, actually more like 2013. where it was really like expected to talk, and and you can kind of see the difference like between these older GDQs up to 2013, where like people are getting more and more comfortable to talk while playing their game.
And also the commentators was more into it most of the time. Like today, like the first time at Classic Games Done Quick, the like commentaries, like I was the expert commentator for some games, but I wasn't really expert of the runs. So,
Andrew, you're gonna say something? Yeah.
I was just going to say, I remember when they started putting a commentary on the Speed Demos archive runs, and especially I remember Freddy's for Mario 3 and being like, oh, this is awesome. This is way cooler than like just the video, just having the video. So like back then, that was a big deal to me anyway, to see the commentary from the actual runners, the voice.
So,
and just to add another thing there, that for example, I was running these old run and gun games, and I was shooting quite fast compared to many other runners and so on. So for me, also that was very important to like be there and show that like you can shoot this fast, and everyone like the experienced runners there could see it, because I got a lot of comments about that. Many times.
I think for sure for the event, I think a lot of us were like, we all got called cheaters all the time because people come on Speed Demos Archive and like these guys can't be legit, like whatever. So it was kind of cool to actually have the marathon where like all these people are really good gamers and we could actually show off our skills and everything, and people really responded well to it.
I shouldn't have been surprised by it, but one of the things there were some videos that were uploaded around 2010, maybe within a year of the event actually happening, and you can see some of the comments still accusing you of, nefarious things going on, even though you're obviously there live doing it. It's always a bit surprising, but it's great that there was this opportunity for you all to show it that it actually happens for real. Okay. So the first few runs we're gonna look at here are Super Mario Brothers, the first one, Contra, and then SMB2. And before we get into the runs, Frezzy, I'll start with you. Was anybody else playing Contra? Were you the current world record holder? Tell us a little bit about the Contra scene before we jump into that one.
So I have to remember here, but it was a world record for. Was it Tom Montgomery, 11:25, I think, and then it got beaten by Crocktock. No, I beat it with 10:55, and then Crocktock beat me with 10:50, and then I took it back to 10:40, and I think I got a lot of comments about the run, and I think it was a fun game to play, so I pushed it harder. So I got I ended up after. Submitting several runs, I think I was down to 18 or 17 by SDA timing.
I think 17, yeah.
Wow.
Yeah. At that point. This was like 1 year before maybe the event or something.
Oh, wow. We'll get into some of the strats during the video, but first we're going to start with Super Mario Brothers. And Andrew, was anybody else running the game, and were you the current world record holder at the time? To set us up for what Mario Brothers looked like. Super Mario Brothers looked like in 2010.
Let me think about that. Super Mario Brothers always had some competition. I usually had like somebody who was competing against me, but I think the record was I think it was 5 flat. At that point, or maybe a 4:59 had just happened. I don't remember.
I think sub 5 had happened back then, but it was like just under.
Yeah, I think I had just gotten a 4:59. I'm trying to remember who was like. I know Cypher actually was competing on Super Mario Brothers, but I think he was a little bit later, maybe 2011, 2012.
Yeah, that would be later.
Yeah. I can't remember. It's hard because there's someone named like Jay Wild, Scott Kessler, and Trevor Seguin. They had stopped competing at that point. But at that point, I think I basically was just grinding the game down myself, and I had some competition, but I was kind of just focused on bringing it as low as I could at that point.
I can't wait to share this here with you. So we're going to transition right now. We're going to bring up the run from the very first classic games done quick, and this is Super Mario Brothers. It starts off blindfolded, and how did that happen, Andrew? What's going on here?
So I had made like some old YouTube videos where I'd try to do it blindfolded, and I had some fun with that, and I'm like, oh, maybe I could try that for games done quick. And yeah, it was kind of a spontaneous thing. And someone's like, hey, put this sombrero on. They're like, okay.
I love the fact too, like you hadn't been practicing this for like years or anything. This is just something that happened that day.
Yeah, it was like I had beaten the first level maybe one time before blindfolded. So it was kind of like, yeah, I didn't really practice all that much, is why it's not the best, but it was great.
Mike, had you planned, or were there thoughts about doing donations incentives, or did these things naturally occur? How did we get some donation incentives in the first?
So donation incentives, I remember that wasn't really something we thought of very much during CGDQ. I remember the Speed Gamers did a Final Fantasy marathon, and apparently someone donated $1,300 to name everyone Sephiroth in Final Fantasy VII. And we were having Final Fantasy VI, so we were like, oh, we should do that. We should have people donate for names. And like, I didn't really think of much of it at the time. Like, I don't know, this will, maybe raise a couple dollars or something.
Right.
But like, I remember when it actually came to, Final Fantasy VI and the naming incentives, like some of us started getting into it and wanted, certain characters to be named a certain way. So we started really getting into it. Once Final Fantasy VI rolled around. But yeah, there wasn't really too much in the way of donation incentives or challenges. I remember Stansky, who was a well-known Sonic runner at the time, especially, Sonic 2 specifically. When Mike89 was playing Sonic 2, Stansky gave him some challenges to do to try and complete. Like he wanted Mike to do a certain trick in Chemical Plant, either 1 or 2. And I remember he wanted Mike to do Sky Chase, the auto scroller, without getting hit, which he did successfully complete, and Stansky donated $50. But yeah, there wasn't too much aside from like names, a couple of character choices here and there. So because it was the first time, so we just didn't know.
So we're seeing a lot of death here, Andrew. I mean, yeah. I'm curious, were you trying to go by feel, or is we doing, like, how are you walking yourself through this blindfold? Because it's pretty funny.
It's just memory, basically.
Gotcha.
I had gotten the beginning down, and I'm like, okay, I can hit this first Goomba. Yeah, this is, watching this now, it's like, wow, this is very pathetic. But
first time ever.
Yeah, but we thought this was amazing because, like, we didn't do a game blindfolded.
Oh my gosh, he's doing it blindfolded. This is insane. It's like, look, like now people do like the whole game of Mike Tyson's Punch Out, where I didn't even get hit by Mike Tyson. Okay. So like, this in comparison to that is it's like watching prehistoric gameplay.
At this point, hey, you made it through the first level. 1-1. At this point, how long have you been playing speedrunning Super Mario Brothers 1? Like, how long have you been speedrunning at this point?
For Super Mario Brothers, I started speedrunning this in like 2004.
Wow.
And it was kind of an off and on thing. Like I would always be working at it, like trying to think up new ideas and such, but after I got the 5-minute run in 2007, I kind of like took a break from the game for a while, and like there was really not too much else to do in the game, and there weren't really many improvements, so I kind of let it go for a little while. I had been speedrunning it at that point probably about 5 years total.
And I'm always curious at this time, was life split around, or how would you even time your runs? Like, how do you get an official time, especially with a game as needs to be as precisely timed as Super Mario Brothers 1?
No, I can answer that. Live school is not around. So what would happen is that like after the run was captured, we go through it in like a program like Virtual Dub or AVSynth, and like so we could get like the exact frame counts of like when the run started and ended.
Got it.
It's funny because people talk about like, why don't you have splits up? Like when I first started, when I was streaming, like even in, I don't know, 2015, sometimes I wouldn't have splits. People are like, why don't you have splits? What are you doing? People get really confused. And I'm like, I am still not even used to doing splits. I've never done, prior to this, I had never done splits. I just kind of knew how I was doing throughout the run. And then I would time it after the fact.
I can't stop laughing at you trying to figure out where you're supposed to be jumping and everything. It's just it's a bit like we're guessing here at this point. So then, improvement as far as taking the time down and everything like that, were you just assuming that the strats that you were doing were going to be faster than the ones you were doing before as kind of just a trial and error thing at that point?
I started to because I played the game so much, I started to kind of understand the frame rule stuff, like how the game worked. And like I would like just know when the screen would transition a certain way and be like, okay, I'm doing this part well. I think I would use the game timer a lot, actually. Like I got a high, 200, which means that like I definitely saved time here. And if I screwed up just a little bit, like this is a mid 200, so this isn't going to save time. So I'd often use the game itself as kind of my timer for how I was doing.
And were you aware of some of the things you could do we've discovered nowadays with clipping into pipes and walls? I mean, had you kind of discovered some of that throughout your speedrun trials?
Yeah, it was back then I feel like people really didn't think that a lot of the tricks were even possible. Like doing a wall jump at the end of the run was like unheard of. Like, no, how would you ever do that? Like that's after doing all the other stuff. And then it's like nowadays it's like a joke. Like everyone does that. So it's kind of funny to see all those tricks get added.
It's definitely pretty interesting to see where it's come from, and I know at some point here you're going to throw in the towel because it's just it's getting pretty rough to get. Okay, there we go. It's finally coming off. You get a chance. Where did this run rest in the marathon? Was this like day 2, or was this later on the first? When did this run get performed?
This was day 2.
Okay. So
I don't remember exactly when, but it was day 2.
So, Mike, I got to ask, by day 2, were you still frustrated with everything, or were things starting to feel like a marathon at that point?
Things were starting to feel like a marathon. So what happened is that I was supposed to run the game Secret of Mana co-op with some people. Huh. And long story short, I was so tired that thankfully Secret of Mana has an option where you can just dip out and like you can just have the AI control a partner. And I was like so tired because it was like 6 a.m. or something like that like I just had to pass out, especially since I was so stressed out from having to organize this and the stress of moving everything and the uncertainty of it all, et cetera, that I passed out for an hour and then
plenty of time.
Exactly, plenty of sleep. But then I realized that like nothing blew up. The world was still going on. Right. They were still playing the video game. Like it was okay. And then like I still definitely had some stress, but like I definitely calmed down a lot after that because I just realized that like, hey, it's going. It's going to be okay.
Andrew, did you have to do a lot of prep for the marathon, or did you think you needed to do a lot of prep for?
I tried to do a lot of prep for the marathon, and I felt really embarrassed though with a lot of my runs. So it's like, really screwing up. It was a little stressful trying to like organize everything, trying to practice everything. I always I was like, remember, I practiced Russian attack so much, and I just failed it, and I don't know why that happened. But
I mean, that's a tough game
looking
because no continues.
Right.
But
yeah.
I mean, it's worth noting that like because we were a much smaller community back then, like, you know, as Frezzy said, he had 15 games. Andrew G had around 10, and I think I had around 10 myself. And I definitely do remember practicing my games a fair bit. But you know, the quality of the runs, you know, just simply isn't as high as, you know, today's standards, obviously. So
I feel like the fact that it was like, you know, it was kind of, the marathon was kind of a new thing too. Like,
yes.
You know, I don't know. I don't think people necessarily even expected us to do that well, especially compared to the speed gamers. We're way more, you know, way better than them, you know. Well, it seemed that way anyway, because we were actually actual speedrunners.
Yeah, we actually had some of the speed gamers. Oh, sorry. We actually had some of the speed gamers visit during Classic Games Done Quick, and the two things I remember were there was one guy who was very emotional about like regretting that he named themselves the Speed Gamers because, you know, they weren't speedrunners. And so our initial goal for Classic Games Done Quick was $5,000, and we ended up raising over $10,000 for care. And I remember he said, and this was when we were well on our way to hit 5,000. So we were very happy. And he said, you know what, if you asked me like for a goal, like a donation goal to hit, I would have told you that $5,000 was way too high. And it's funny because like when I set the goal at $5,000, some people were like, wow, that's a high goal, or that's very ambitious. I'm like, yeah, but I want to aim high. And there was one guy, and he'll deny to this day or say that he said something else. And I won't name and shame though, but he said that like I should have set the goal at $100. I'm like, are you kidding me?
No, and that's the optimism of it. I think is still a part of. I think it still seems like it's part of the DNA of the event today, which I think is way to set the tone for things to come.
Yeah.
There's a great question in chat, and I was going to ask about this, Andrew. Is that were there any consideration there for any like marathon safe strats? Because I noticed there wasn't a wrong warp in 4.2. Was that even discovered? You know, did you consider that at all when doing this like in a live setting like this?
I was just thinking, I'm like, when did I do this run? Because I'm like, it looks not like a very modern run, but it is probably marathon safe. For the most part, I mean, I did definitely do some risky things, try to do the wall jump. I was surprised that I didn't do the wrong warp, but I think back then it wasn't as, the way that you did it wasn't as like consistent. So it makes sense that I took the vine instead.
Same here with 8.3, right? I mean, 8.4, I'm sorry.
Yeah, this is 8.4.
Yeah.
Yeah. I don't know if I mentioned anything about doing a run more consistently than you would do, you know, for your recording attempt of, you know, resetting over and over again and et cetera, et cetera. But, I mean, the runs definitely weren't, many of these runs definitely weren't as advanced as they are now. So I guess in that sense, they were marathon safer.
The one thing I love about SMB1 is that it's still to this day, though, you finished it small. You know, you didn't get any power-ups. You didn't die. You know, there was all these things that happened that still, from a speedrunning perspective, you know, I know it's not a modern run, but that had to have been impressive to a crowd or to an audience in 2010.
I think for sure. I remember looking at the chat and being like, there was like, we got a really good response from people at some points. Like, it was like, wow, like, I think people started sharing it and like it started blowing up a little bit online because it's like, holy crap, this guy just did like whatever. You know?
Awesome.
What time was it? No, the Mario run.
Oh yeah, what was the time? That's a good question.
I don't actually know.
It was definitely a 5-minute run, but
I think it was like I don't know, like a 5:30. I had to guess.
I mean, that's good for a marathon.
Absolutely.
Beat the game either without dying or only one death. So
let's change gears a little bit. Let's. That's first of all. really cool to just set ourselves in history here a little bit. But Contra was, I think, similar to Mario Brothers 1. I remember a lot of my friends and family playing a lot of Contra, having the Contra thing going. Frezzy Man, you mentioned earlier that you were trading the world record back and forth. Did you do any sort of practice or prep or adjustments to make this run happen here at the first Classic Games Done Quick?
I think it was especially two games that I didn't really had to practice, and it was Contra and Super Mario Bros. 3. I was so much into these games. I think earlier that year or year before, I did my world record attempt, so it was very fresh for me, like the knowledge and the strats and like that. But like for Super Mario, I had a lot of like backup strats. For Contra, I realized when I did revisit this run, like I could have practiced, like what if you die on the first boss a bit more. But it was a lot of safety strats as well and backup plans. So for this game, I think I already had a minimalist record as well, which was but I think was a really good run with just a P-shooter. So I was kind of confident with that as well.
That's one of my favorite runs to watch. Now we know it is low percent, but watching just, not getting any power-ups, it's a really fun run to watch. This one specifically has some very famous, there may or may not be a shirt being ripped off on the webcam of this.
Yeah.
How did that come about? What ends up? Why do we get a topless Frezzy for this run?
It was definitely not planned from my side, but I think it was some runners there and also in the chat that it was like it was going on like he should play shirtless and things like that, and it was I was pumped up. It was showtime, and I think we had like 1,000 viewers or something. I thought that this is crazy, and I just did it, and yeah, it was a lot of talking about it, so it was a lot of fun.
I think the Contra run was pretty anticipated. I feel like Speed Demo's archive, like all of Speed Demo's archive, was like really hyped over. The 1017, right? That time sticks out in my head. I don't know if that was later, but
that was the time. Yeah, that was the time back then. Like it was considered, very difficult or unbeatable back then.
You mentioned this when you were telling some stories about GDQ, Mike, that this run, even today, still has some of the modern strats you may actually see in a run of Contra today. I guess maybe that throws to Frezzy then. I apologize. Frezzy, tell us some of the things you were doing in this that make this still kind of an interesting speedrun even today.
First I died on the first boss and I had to reset. So
that always helps.
Like bad luck. You want to like get through that, and so you get spread rhythm. So I think that if I recall correctly, I was like a bit nervous that could I actually reset this game, and I think someone said it like reset. Like so, I think I did it. I don't remember. So I did reset, and I beat the first boss with no problem, and then I get into base level. And this here is where I get the spread rhythm here, like going on. It's a fast fire. For me, I wasn't very. This was like a bad base level stage for me, especially the boss that is coming up at that point. So I was so disappointed, but people thought it was looking good anyway. So that's very important for this round, for this record, I think. But why it stands out it did stand out back then because of the spread rhythm.
We have it turned down a little bit in the volume, but even during the commentary track, you mentioned about spread rhythm and being able to identify that as a strat. Even this is 10, 15 years ago. When did you discover some of those strats to beat this game as fast as you could?
I was playing a lot of run and gun games, and I was a lot into Mega Man games as well. I had the submitted records for Mega Man 3, 4, 5, X and X2, and I think maybe I had most of those records, or some of them, when we got to this event also. So it was fresh, and I probably learned a lot about shooting fast. And I realized while playing Contra that I got saved so much time from it. So it was just clicking, and I improved it like over and over. And I think when I went back revisiting crop tox run at 1050. When I did my 1040, 1033, like the running was not, and the jumping was not like better than his, but I was shooting faster, and especially the base levels, I save a lot of time. So
I'm curious on the SDA side of things in the forums. You mentioned that people were excited to watch this game. Were a lot of people running the game at the time, or was this one of those favorites that people really enjoyed watching? Because I'm even watching it now, and I'm really impressed still by some of this gameplay.
I actually heard that some runners were actually trying to beat this game fast. So even if they wasn't submitting anything, because the only way to submit was to SDA, and you had to beat the record to show your time, basically. So I know like Stansky, the Sonic 2 record holder at the time, he got like 1030 or 1033 or something, and he said that there is no chance I can beat your record. I did everything perfect. I did the 1 frame jump in the snowfield, but I'm so far off. Like I improved everything I can, but I can't beat it. So that was. I know there was many like trying to beat it fast.
Frezzy Man, I'm so glad you mentioned that, because one of the wonderful things about attending a GDQ event nowadays, minus the COVID thing, is that you get to hang out with other speedrunners and you teach each other games and strats, and there's a lot of sharing and just hanging out and playing games together. Was that available at your mom's house? A practice room or a place to hang out outside of the street?
So there wasn't like a practice room, but even though the basement isn't that big, there was like, we had a small area in the side with like this small CRT where people could practice off stream.
Okay.
And it can probably be heard on stream a couple of times because that webcam microphone picked up everything.
I recall one thing, or remember, like we had a room or a locale for like putting our TVs, or do I recall like, is it my memory that is bad? Like,
yeah, we had a little meetup beforehand at like community house. Yeah. Before,
and I remember,
but not during the event.
I remember as a European, I've never heard of Mountain Dews before, and when I got there to this event, like everyone was drinking it, and at one point it was no Mountain Dews, and we went to a shop and bought just all the Mountain Dews there, and broke them, I think, to Mike's house.
So to put it in perspective, like no one really knew like any of the restaurants around where I was. I knew the restaurants, but no one else did. So like, what do a bunch of nerds do when they don't know what to eat? They order a bunch of pizza. So there was so much Domino's that weekend. I can remember the smell nowadays of those pizza boxes. It was pretty bad. And I remember like people like we run out of Mountain Dew at one point, and so I got a 24 pack, and people went through it in less than an hour.
I remember this.
Over under.
We went to gasoline stop. I don't remember what it's called, but in the middle of the night, and we just took all the Mountain Dews they had and went back. Yeah, I remember it.
It's funny. If there is a liquor or convenience stores nearby a GDQ event, that's kind of still what happens nowadays in the middle of the night.
True. And the funny thing is, I don't like Mountain Dew and I don't drink Mountain Dew. So like, there were like 19 other people who were picking up on the slack, I guess.
I wanted to ask something, Frezzy Man. So, you did take a death in the last stage, and maybe it was the stage before. But, one of the popular ways to prepare for a marathon speedrun nowadays is you do these no resets runs. Were you doing something like, were you able, or were you aware of how to kind of compensate for a death depending on where you were in the game?
Yeah, I think I was. I think I could have improved it, like in the first base stage or something. If you lose your spread rhythm, you can get the P-shot or the upgrade for it. But other than that, I knew if I died when I should pick up spread rhythm the next time, because basically when I was playing, most of the time I played from the first stage to the last. Like it was no effective at all practicing. I was going like over and over again. So and I tried to play on an emulator with input lag, but I couldn't really practice the hard stuff with it. It didn't work really good. So I was basically playing on the console. And I also did like a run, I have it recorded when I tried to max out the point system as well, like going from the game over and over again. So I had played it a lot.
Were you able to do it? Were you able to get a max score?
I don't remember. I knew I got a very high score, like looping it many times.
6,553,000. So there's like a max, I think, on that, right?
It's Andrew mentioned it earlier that playing on emulator compared to if you're used to playing on console, it just can be a real challenge. It's not that one's better than the other; it's totally different. With that input lag. So great that it's great that you were able at least to do the no resets and work us through our progress. Go ahead.
And another thing about this run, I did some research on it. Like I did finish it, I think, in 10:47. And like if you compare it to later marathons, in 2013, Mr. K did 11:34, and then we had European Speedster Assembly. I did one in 10:40, and in 2013 I did 11:40. And then it was a race in 2017 with Toad and the Mexican runner, and they got 10:40 and 10:44. So I think it was a decent run at the time. Were very good. I was very satisfied with how it went out, even if I was disappointed with the base level. I was glad I got everything else. So
there's some really awesome recovery in this, and I'm curious. At the time, were you aware, or what was the understanding of the RNG in the game? Because you make some really amazing adjustments on the fly here, even mid jump sometimes. And were you aware how the game mechanics kind of worked, or is this just something you're used to dealing with?
I think I played it a lot, from start to finish. So I think I played it so much. One thing is that you try to shoot as much as you can all the time, because there's in the later stage so many enemies pops out, so they can come in really bad spots. So it could be strategic also to jump at the right places and shoot at the right places, just in case an enemy appear. But at sometimes if they pop up in the bad moment, then it can kill you anyway, basically. But I think it's just a matter of practicing. I didn't think of that as much when I was watching this run, before this meeting here. So. Yeah,
it's great to see such a competitive time still in a marathon setting. It's really impressive. There is I think a now infamous something that happens on camera after this, where you put the shirt back on, we get a rip off. Was that from a donation incentive? How did the shirt being ripped actually become a thing?
I think so. I don't recall, remember exactly how it went. But I realized my T-shirt was so thin. So why is it really off? I didn't think I told anyone. I just did it.
I think I don't think it was a donation incentive, actually. Although we did have a donation incentive for the shirt after it was ripped off. But I think it was just someone in the chat asking him a question, and then we relayed it to him. And it was I want something about shirtless, or tear off your shirt or something like that. And he just goes like this, and he just tears it right off.
No hesitation, just go for it.
And another point from that run is that everyone is sitting on the couch playing their games, but I broke the old chair and to sit on, because I couldn't really shoot fast while sitting in the couch, because I had to be close to I had to have a good grip of the controller and everything.
Wow, interesting.
I remember half the runs, Mike 89 sleeping on the couch.
And we may see a little bit of that later on, I promise. Yes, absolutely, Gigi. So let's move. We're going to hit one more run before we take a quick break, folks. And this is Super Mario Brothers 2. And I guess my first question to you, Andrew, is: had you been running the game at all? Were you familiar with the game before your run came up for SMB2 US?
Let me think. Yeah, Mario 2. I think, did I have the record at this point? I want to say I did, but I'm actually not entirely sure. I think I had a 9:15 during this run. I was pretty comfortable with it. I remember being pretty, like, I was well practiced at this at the time.
I did some research right away on Super Mario Brothers 2, and it says under the 2007 you had 915, right?
Oh.
Yeah.
And was there, was there a community around SMB2 speedrunning at the time? Were there other people running the game?
There were a few people. Scott Kessler had ran Mario 2 before me. A guy named T-Mont had run this game. CAC, who is active still, he's around, but he was my biggest competitor. Like, he had a 919 before I did, and so I got the 915 to beat him, and then he eventually topped me again. So it was it's been a pretty big rivalry between us for a lot of years, and he has a better time than I do now. So he definitely came back and showed his skills.
Oh, really? I thought he retired.
No, he's still around. Like, he is active on Discord, actually.
Oh, nice.
That's so cool. So it's obvious that you've done some, I guess what you'd say is discovery in this game, because even though these aren't the modern speedrun stats, it's obvious you've kind of paved your routing here. You've played through some things. You mentioned there are other people. Were you discovering some of these things yourself, or were some of these routing and strats and character selections being shared with each other?
We kind of, over the Speed Demos Archive forum, we kind of, we went back and forth. Like, the way that I would try and figure out, like, who was doing well, or like who was doing strategies the fastest is, like, I would actually have splits. I'd be like, oh, at this time, like, I ended at 102, and I'd had a list for each of the stages, and I'd make one for every person who did it, and be like, no, Toad isn't faster there, like, Mario's faster there.
Yeah.
It was kind of tricky to figure out, like, what characters made sense for each stage, and the strategy's changed over the years. Like, the game's really had a lot of improvements over the years.
Some really interesting things, and it's obvious. Look, you've already discovered, Toad holding an item runs faster than just Toad by himself. So just some interesting discoveries very early on that end up in the marathon speedrun of it.
Yeah. Yeah.
No, was there any consideration? I mean, were there any other categories being run at the time, or was the any percent category? Was it even called any percent? Like, what were the categories like around 2010?
Yeah. I'm just wondering what happened to the game there.
Did it just freeze? Oh no.
Yeah, so our NES for Classic Games Done Quick had a lot of issues running games.
That wasn't from it wasn't from somebody stomping.
And it's really prevalent in the Teenage Mutant Ninja Turtles run, which I would recommend watching if you have the time, because it's definitely a very, very interesting run to watch.
I just remember a really funny moment from we're at Mike's mother's house, and someone, like, the game's not working, and someone's like, pass the alcohol. And I just thought it was funny, like, out of context, like rubbing alcohol, like, that out of context, it seemed like, oh, we're all drinking here.
Get it to work. Whose Nintendo was used at the first one?
I don't remember.
Not sure.
I know I broke all my consoles over the ocean, but I don't know.
Did all of them make it safely?
Yeah, they did. I wrapped it in soft, clothes and stuff, so I think it made it.
So I'm also curious. One of the ways that I discovered speedrunning was from this now infamous Super Mario Brothers 3 tasks that was shared around from person to person. In 2010, was anybody aware of tool-assisted speedruns? Were they a thing? Were they even possible? I'm wondering if you even had something like that to use as kind of a base for how to approach a speedrun.
Yeah. So task videos basically started around the same time that Speed Demos Archive was accepting games outside of Quake. So beginning of 2004, basically. And while there was a bit of animosity between the two camps back in those very early days, with some speedrunners thinking that tasks are cheated or whatever because they're using save states. But I would say even back then, like there were definitely speedrunners, including me, who would sometimes use the tool-assisted speedruns to help them with their speedruns.
It's not, so there were people doing it back in the time. Andrew, did you ever did you ever visited any of that info or watched any of those videos to maybe consider some of those?
Yeah, I definitely did. You know, it's funny, back like when I first found test videos, like I thought it was some sort of like exclusive website. I don't know why that I did, but I didn't think I was allowed on it or something. I don't know why, but yeah, because I'm like, okay, these guys are like programmers or something. I don't know what they're doing. They're they're figuring out the game in different ways. But no, I did end up like eventually like, oh wait, like this is just a normal website. And I definitely would use some of their stuff as kind of a guide at times, but a lot of times they do things that are impossible. So sometimes you'd have something to go off of, and sometimes you really wouldn't. It would just be like, well, I can't press left and right at the same time, so I guess I'll just figure out a different way to do this part.
It makes me chuckle that you had that experience. SGDQ 2019, I got to get a chance to hang out with the TaskBot folks. And for those of you that aren't aware, TaskBot is a team of people that make that thing happen. And they were some of the nicest, and it was some of the most fun I've ever had hanging out with people. But they sometimes speak a different language. Like there's some high level discussions that happen that I was spellbound by some of the words that they were using. I'm like, that can't be real English, but apparently it was. So as we're looking back on Super Mario Brothers 2 here, we're finally, I assume this is the run that's going to be going for it. You did some things too where you actually have some really good control of Luigi. So I'm guessing at this point, you've put in some reps in the game. Have you been running this game for a few years at this point?
Yeah, I put in a lot of time into Mario 2, actually. Probably almost as much time as I have Mario 1, actually. Didn't know that. No, I didn't grind it. It's weird because I put in a lot of time thinking about strategies and coming up with the strategies for Mario 2. But I didn't spend as much time grinding it. I just had a lot of fun figuring out like what's the best methods and such, and the best tricks. Really, actually, there ended up being a lot of glitches in the game, so it was just fun to explore.
It sounds cool that you were able to find some of those early on, because nowadays it's, you have to pull off some really interesting glitches and clips and things to make, especially the warps run work, possibly the any % category. Did you ever think about implementing any of those, or did you implement some of those into the speedrun?
Basically, let me think about this. Like the first level, I remember I found it's more simple things back then, but like I figured out that you could, if you take damage, if you do a damage boost, when you blow up the wall, then you don't have to, you're not getting hit by it. Like you already are in invincibility frames when you're going through the wall, instead of get to the wall and then you get hit by the bomb, and it's like, so basically I saved like a second. And that was just some little oversight that people had. It was just a lot of little things like that. Like, people, 1-2 was kind of interesting. Like some people would use Toad. Like some people would use all the different characters for 1-2. And someone suggested using the key to kill Birdo, and like, that's just as fast as like beating it normally. I think it was like 1 second faster if you did it optimally. So it's just like, I would find all these little time savers, and they would all add up over the course of the whole run.
This is one of those things that I'm curious if this happened at all. And maybe you might remember a story or an anecdote from this time period, but having so many talented speedrunners in one place, perhaps maybe there'd really been nothing like this. Maybe there'd been something smaller, but did that happen where, somebody who doesn't run Super Mario Brothers 2 maybe saw somebody, a strat or anything? What kind of, outside of the streamer, what kind of chats, were those kind of things happening? I'm just trying to think, like,
Primarily, I mean, I definitely talk with people on task videos, and I definitely talk with people on Speed Demo's archive. But besides that, that's basically it. And I think that's why I'm very independent with speedrunning. I like to try and think through things myself, just because I think it's what I used to do back in the day. It's like there's, even on the popular games, there wasn't really necessarily the information around. And I've had a lot of fun trying to figure out the games, and I think that's part of the experience for me with speedrunning.
Mike, you mentioned early on that, as you picked the games, you decided on retro, and then you decided to pick some of the more well-known games like NES, Genesis, those kind of era type games. Were there any? Did you know all of the speedrunners that you were picking? Were you fully aware of the runs that you were picking? I'm curious, was there a selection process, or was this just basically what got submitted at this point?
Yeah, I mean, the selection process was basically who could come there and what they could play. Basically, I even. And I would never do this nowadays, obviously, but I remember even suggesting some games people could possibly pick up for the events.
Andrew,
I mean, because I thought that maybe we would have a lack of submissions, and even back then we only had 20 people there, and not a whole lot of time into the event. It was about 50 hours. Yeah, it wasn't a concern, filling up the schedule.
Well, I'm curious, and that's a really good point. Andrew or Frezzy, did you pick up any games that maybe you hadn't run before just for CGDQ?
Yeah.
Which ones?
So Metroid and Metroid Zero Mission, both of them a little bit, it was close to be good runs in a way, but they failed a little bit in the end. But those I never was aiming for the world record, but I just loved playing them, and so that's two examples of games that because so there was players we need to have Metroid games for the marathon.
We gotta have some
otherwise it's a classic marathon. So I did it for the community's sake.
For me, I had speedrun most of the games already that I picked. I think F-Zero was pretty much the only one that I didn't really have a speedrun on Speed Demo's archive or a timer of any sort. That was a game I was always pretty good at, so I was like, I'll give it a shot. I can't remember if there's any other ones. I think all the other ones I had pretty much done. I was going to say Mega Man 2, but no, because that was the next marathon. I think I had run Mega Man 2. I don't remember, actually.
I recall I did the Super Mario Kart, if I recall correctly. And that game, I knew I was not close to the world records. But I think I posted a time, I could do, I think it was special cup or all the cups, I don't remember. I can do it this fast. And then the community or the topic where we were discussing, there was some people saying, yeah, why not? So I played it.
Did I do Mike Tyson's Punch-Out during this, or
yes,
I'm really getting mixed up on
you did run Mike Tyson's Punch-Out during this.
Okay, I wasn't sure
if I tell a story about that, because there's actually kind of funny story.
Please.
Yeah.
So Sinister One, has done many blindfolded Punch-Out runs and the like, and is very good at Punch-Out in general. So one of the reasons why he started playing Punch-Out and picking up in the first place is that, and I'm sorry because this is going to be a slight diss at you, Andrew, is that he was seeing you being coached by Koreshi, and he just went, I can do better than this. I was like, I know better strats than this. And that's when he started wanting to run Punch-Out and running it for marathons. Is seeing you at CGDQ and being like, I can do better than this.
Yeah, that was Mike Tyson Punch-Out was actually, I think it was actually a donation incentive, wasn't it? I remember
it might have been, yeah.
guys were like, "Oh, Andrew, like, can anyone run Mike Tyson?" I think it was like, "Can anyone play Mike Tyson's Punch Out?" And I'm like,
"Oh yeah," because the chat was demanding it. Yeah, they really wanted someone to play Punch Out.
I'm like, I could if you guys really need me to, but I'm not that great at it.
Let me get this straight, though, then. So we can thank Andrew G for having basically blindfolded Mike Tyson Punch-Out runs at Games Done Quick. Is that really what's happening?
I guess. in a very indirect way, yes.
Well, I think that's part of the fun, though. I think that's one of the things that there's some real things that seem like they were established at this first Games Done Quick that is still part of the DNA of what this whole Games Done Quick thing is, and that's like getting a chance to be around all these incredible speedrunners and see games that, hey, maybe I could try that, maybe I can do that, or maybe not. I don't know. There's just really impressive displays, and oh man, okay. What happens here? We got to talk about this. What happens here at the end, Andrew?
This is amazing. So I died at the boss, and like, okay, I'm gonna, we'll play it normally. But what happens during this fight is something I had never seen this happen during any of my runs. And at this point, I think I had the world record. So it's really surprising that I've never seen this. But you'll see in a second if I can ever hit Wart with any of these vegetables. You'll see in a second just what happens.
Yeah, maybe you could turn up the volume just a little bit. If I don't know if we can turn up the volume. We'll try a little bit. I saw that in the chat, but
I remember this fight taking me a little while. This is like I'm getting really nervous, and I guess my B button kept slipping, I think.
Okay. So, and it's a lot of times this could totally understand that this could happen in a boss fight at the end of the run.
What? Yeah, so I just knocks her out.
There you go. You hear the people. Apparently nobody else had seen that either.
So I killed Wart, and then after I killed Wart, I threw an extra vegetable at him randomly, and I just happened to hit a 2-frame window during Wart's death animation that can knock him off screen, and I was like, "Oh my gosh, that's probably a time saver for this game."
Yeah, it is.
It wasn't during the marathon. We looked into it later. It didn't end up actually saving time, but if things had lined up a little bit differently, it would have. It's just like. But it was a really cool thing that happened during the marathon. I was like, "Oh my gosh, what is that? What just happened?"
It's one of the very first moments of that's never happened before.
Yeah, exactly.
One of the first times. That's never happened before. Well, first of all, there's some really great things to see, especially from the early history of Mario 2 speedrunning. But secondly, then to have that happen, wonderful. Whew. Okay, folks, here's what we're going to do. First of all, thank you all for being here. It's really great to get to hang out with everyone. Big thanks to Andrew G, Frezzy Man, and Mike Uyama all joining here as we're taking a look back. We are taking a look way back when to Classic Games Done Quick 2010. This is Games Done Classic, and this is the very first episode we're ever doing of this. The idea here is to look back at legendary moments with the legendary people that made them happen for Games Done Classic. My name's Lat Mackey. I'm your host. Thank you all for being here. We're going to take a short break, but before we do, I have a couple of announcements here before we take a quick break. And number one is that this show is being brought to you by people like you. Thank you all for subscribing, for following, for donating, for subbing. All of those things make these shows happen on the GDQ Hotfix. Thank you, thank you, thank you. If you would like to have an ad-free viewing experience, please consider using your Prime Gaming account to support the weekly GDQ Hotfix content. All of those things go a long way to making all of these shows happen. Thank you for making it happen. And AGDQ 2021 is just around the corner. It's going to be online this year. It's January 3rd to January 10th, and the schedule is now available. It's out there right now. If you go to the Games Done Quick channel, you can see the schedule all right there. Prize submissions are open now as well, and those will close on December 26th. So you have a little bit over a month to get prize submissions into there and ready for AGDQ 2021. Folks, we're going to take about a 5-minute break. So thank you so much all for being here. We're coming right back with more Games Done Classic, looking back at the very first CGDQ from 2010. Thank you. And welcome back to Games Done Classic, the premiere episode of Games Done Classic, where we are looking back at classic moments from all of GDQ history, the now more than 10 years of GDQ history, with the people that made them happen. Look at this panel today. Mike Uyama, the creator and founder of Games Done Quick and original runner at the very first CGDQ. Frezzy Man from Sweden is joining us, and Andrew G, the legend Andrew G, with wearing the Super Mario Brothers shirt, I might add. Thank you all so much for being here. My name's Lat Mackey, and if you're just joining us, well, folks, I am just about the biggest speedrunning geek you can probably meet. I love this whole thing. I love Games Done Quick. I'm just a big fan of this community and what it all means, and all of this good that we do through some really high level gameplay that's we are watching today. And the event we're looking back at today is some of the runs from the very first classic Games Done Quick in 2010. The next run we're going to look at it's going to be a little bit of a highlight, and it's kind of some of the Mega Man and Mega Man X games that were run at the very first classic Games Done Quick. And you may notice that there's no webcam footage, there's no audio. Mike, tell us a little bit about what was happening during this first Mega Man run by Andrew G.
So, as I said before, but we've had a lot of people come in since MagFest. They had really horrible internet there, like DSL internet for basically entire hotel, had maybe half a megabit of upload. And we got a stream working, but as you can see, there's Gutsman on stage right now, but instead of this smooth movement, you got slideshow where like these platforms would essentially teleport. Yes, and that was back at 6 when the event was supposed to start, and then we decided that it wouldn't work at MagFest and we should go to my mother's house to make the event happen, because that was pretty close, only 10 minutes away. And we had actually done like a quick test there to see if the stream worked, and it did, because it turns out when you have good internet, you can make or decent internet, you can make a stream work. So, when we finally get the stream running like at 8:30 or 9, it's already like 2 or 3 hours late, and we don't have like any of the commentary stuff set up, but I just wanted to get the stream started as soon as possible because we were already running late. We're already running 2.5, 3 hours late. So just getting the stream up was a priority, and then getting up processing donations and commentary and the like was secondary to that, just because we wanted to get a stream running. And I remember when we started the stream, we had like 400 or 500 viewers. And we're like, wow, how do we have so many people?
This is amazing. Well, and we're looking, so this was the very first run that, now that we're back at we're in your mom's basement now. This is, yep. We're actually there. Andrew, were you running Mega Man at the time? Set the stage a little bit for running Mega Man.
Mega Man's been a kind of off and on project for like, as long as I can remember. I don't know why I never really got that seriously into it, but I had run it quite a bit, and I followed the scene for a long time. And it's always been one of my favorite games. I just I think at this point, this was one of the serious, I was probably the most serious about this game at the time I was running this.
And I know, Frezzy, you've been playing a lot of, you have a lot of submissions as far as Mega Man games going. Had you played the original one? Were you watching this run when it was going down in the basement?
I think I was watching, but I was never really into try to pull up a run of Mega Man 1. So I just enjoyed playing it.
It seems like it's definitely different than what comes after this, 2, 3, all the way up through 10, 11, and the X series. What were were there others running the original Mega Man, Andrew, at the time?
I think Trevor Seguin had the world record at that point. I think he was like way ahead of everyone at the time. Like, I think at the time, and then. Seth Glass came along and demolished everyone.
I was going to ask, has the game been broken? I just saw you do a screen wrap, so I'm assuming that some of those things were discovered, but was this in its infancy of some of the tech around the game?
Yeah,
it was only really minor things.
Go ahead, Mike.
Yeah, the game wasn't really broken apart as it is nowadays. As Andrew G, it was really only minor stuff.
I remember asking Mike Uyama specifically for tips on this part. I remember for some reason I was really struggling with.
Oh yeah, because this was like one of those best challenges we did the year before. So I had a little bit of experience with this section specifically. So.
And Mega Man 1's a tough game. Like I feel like, I don't know, just even casually, it's a pretty tough game to like, I don't know, to learn.
Especially,
technical game.
I don't know if any of you have had the same experience, but my first experience with Mega Man was after playing 2 and 3. So it's tough when you've learned to do certain things in 2 and 3 and then come back to this game that's just not, it just feels different. And I know the levels are laid out a bit differently and things like that. So it definitely has a different experience than other perhaps more well-known or more popular Mega Man games.
I don't even remember how this went down.
Let's hope you beat the game. Were there any differentiations on the categories of Mega Man at the time? Did we have some of the categories you see nowadays with major glitches and things like that?
There was no, there was none of that found at that point.
Yeah, I know with Mega Man 2 that eventually happened, but I think that happened after this event because really a lot of the zips and the like, I think they might have existed in tool-assisted speedruns, but they weren't. They either weren't considered practical in speedruns or no one had really researched them for like speedruns.
And that's what we're gonna. Oh, good. I'm sorry.
Yeah, I know that for Mega Man 2 in 2008, Seth Glass did that with wall zips and stuff. But then later, I think it got even more broken. And I also know that the tasks for these games at this time, about this 10 years ago or something, they started to be really like broken. I think that we realized more and more, I think, that we could actually break these games as well on a console.
Mega Man 1 specifically, I know that like Trevor Seguin, he ran it glitchless, and then he later improved it by like a full minute, but it was still glitchless. So I think until Seth Glass came, it was primarily just that.
And that's, as we're transitioning in here too, this is perhaps one of my favorite games of all time, and a game I still love playing through today, Mega Man 2. Had you done any prep work with it? Were you actively running it, Frezzy Man, at this point?
I just love this game so much. It's one of my favorites. Like, the soundtrack is so amazing, and how you use the weapons all the time, it's really like well planned in this game. I did... I wouldn't say like really serious. Well, I did. I did beat like Richard Reta's first record at the time before Seth Glass did his speedruns and all that, like with 1 second. But we knew that we have also in the community, I think also we discussed this game, like we can beat like Richard Reta's time, and we know some more tricks. And I had been doing practice about it. But I was into so many other games as well, so I couldn't really get everything done in a run. But I did beat his time, like one time, like with 1 second. But I knew that I could improve it with 1 minute with all the tricks I knew. So it was no like meaning to submit it. So I played it, and I enjoyed just play through it every now and then. So I was pretty confident that I could do like a decent time. But at this time, like I know Seth Glass had done his like improved the world record 1 or 2 years earlier. So I knew that I was not the best player, but I thought I was probably one of the best at the time, at least.
And one of the things you and I have talked about before we even got to today's stream is that, you're always one to be looking out and finding new ways to beat things and to play through games. Andrew's mentioned it multiple times that he very much enjoys, the process of going through and finding new things. And was that the case with this game? Were you discovering things that you hadn't seen other people doing in their runs yet?
No, I was. Okay. I think I was a runner that was more of a grinder, and I wanted to see other people like finding stuff. So I never discovered like a lot, but I did discover when I practicing and trying, and I found some tricks that was like a discovery for many games as well. But for Mega Man 2, I never tried the glitch, like doing the glitches myself, more than if I saw someone doing it, then I pull it off. So,
Mike, on SDA, Mike, was there an active Mega Man community where there was because it's a really popular community nowadays. There's a very lively and active group of people running this game. Was that
Yeah,
did that
there's a
exist back
very
then?
there's a very active Discord. There were definitely some people who ran Mega Man games, but it was really just a couple of people. I mean, let me tell you something. If you're, as I said before, if your game had like more than one runner, it was kind of a big community back then. You know, like the community was just much smaller. So like when people say like, oh, my community is so small, there's only like, 5 active runners. I'm like, it's pretty big. That's fine. But yeah, now you have like, some of the biggest communities in speedrunnings, like, for some of the Super Mario games, you have like hundreds or even thousands of people who are in the Discords or put in a run. It's definitely grown a lot since then. So I would say there was a small community, but it, probably no more than like 5 people.
And that was a big community.
Exactly, that was a big community back then.
Frezzy, tell us a little bit. You mentioned that you were using some of the other strats that you'd seen people do. Did you route this run on your own? Were you taking any different level orders, or were you kind of following what was being done at the time?
For this run, I was doing like Richard Aretha's old route, which means you start with the airman and so on. So I didn't use set glass strats for that route because I hadn't practiced these tricks so much. So, but I think I was quite decent to play like the old school route, I think that I did quite a good job anyway. Like I think I finished in I don't remember exactly, but 34 minutes maybe. But I screwed up in the Wily Stage 4 at the boss. The classic mistake you can do, like you have to retrack a lot. So.
And you were mentioning that you ran, both you, Andrew, and Mike all ran multiple, tons of games at this first event. Did you have a chance to actually practice this one? How do you even get a chance to prep for something like that when you're doing so many runs?
For Mega Man 2, it was just core love. Like every now and then I just play through it. I like it so much. So, So I think I had it in my back when I signed up for it. So I could do it like quite well, but not compared to what someone now at the top level should do with Mega Man 2. But at this point, I think it was like a good add to the list of games for the marathon.
Yeah, you need to realize that for many of the games back then, that like the level of running is not quite as high as it is now. So like what might have been a high level run back then might be like, middle of the pack, or even somewhat low level run, nowadays, depending on the game.
There are, I think, a few things that you can point to for the growth of the speedrunning community and the things that we're doing nowadays. And I think it's undeniable what GDQ has how it's helped grow the community. Were you aware of any of that? Like, did you think that, was there any foresight at all to think where the community could go to from where it started, from what we're looking at here?
No. So just to be honest, there were actually 2 people who ran games at the event who thought that Classic Games Done Quick was 100% going to fail. They were and that we were all going to go back to like SDA style speedrunning of like, not streaming and just like, recording runs, getting them uploaded onto SDA and stuff, after this event. And they confessed to me like a year or 2 after Classic Games Done Quick that like they didn't practice that much for their runs because they thought that this event would not be very successful. I'm not going to say who they are, but they know who they are. And but yeah, no, I just remember even after all the stress and all the troubles that we had setting up this event, I remember like right after we had this event, I was like, oh, this is fun, we should do it again. like it wasn't really like a ton of foresight there. It was just like I knew we had to grow, but like I didn't think it would grow to what it was today. If you told me, raise millions or multiple millions of dollars, in the future, I would be like, I would like laugh in your face or something. I would have laughed in your face back then. Or like, what are you talking about?
Well, I think that leads to a great question, and this is both for I think for everyone here. I'll start with Frezzy Man. What made you decide or choose to start speedrunning in the first place? Like when this didn't exist, there was no Twitch, there was no there wasn't a place to find these things. What made you even decide to try out a speedrun in the first place, Frezzy Man?
I think that I didn't have many games when I was a kid. Like I had 3 NES games, and I played them over and over again. And it was Super Mario Brothers 3 and DuckTales and Super Mario Bros. And I submitted speedruns for all of these later. So when the first records of these classic games actually came out for the first time, I was very stoked and excited, and I was impressed by the players, especially Richard Areta with his Mega Man 2 and the SMB3 runs. But I also knew if I put my head into it, I think I could actually beat this time. So the seed was started to grow right away when I saw it. So it was just that for me, I had played so much of the classic games. So I think it was natural in a way for me.
How about you, Andrew? What made you first decide to try a speedrun?
Yeah, I have a very similar answer to Frezzy. I always really loved the NES games. I grew up with Nintendo and Super Nintendo mostly, and I always really, especially the Mario series, I always really loved them. And I always thought I'm pretty good at these games. I like them a lot. So when I found out that there was actually competition for it and there was a way to compete on these games, it just was blew my mind. Oh my gosh, I can compete on these games. Because it's not like these are multiplayer games. It's not like whatever. But so it was kind of here are these games that I really like and I really enjoy, and to find that there's other people competing on them and I can actually have some fun with that. It was a big motivation for me to start doing it and recording runs.
Just this boss fight, the final boss, I think I did a pretty good job with I got it down in the ear.
Yeah, that was nice and fast.
That was insane. If I recall, it was faster than the current world record at the time. So I was satisfied with that.
Absolutely. That's something I noticed about throughout all the Wily fights. It was really impressive, some of the things you were doing, because that's that's not easy to do, to pull off, first of all, that many shots and good mashing and everything.
Yeah. And one more thing about the community, how it was growing. I remember between the MagFest and the Classic Games Done Quick, I think Mike did a trip in Europe, and we were talking about speedrunning community and everything like that a lot. During that trip we did in Norway for 1 week, and I was so frustrated, or I knew that a bomb of some sort would hit the community and the popularity would grow, but I didn't expect it to do it the way it did. But I knew there was so many viewers of the videos, and so I think that some YouTube videos have so many viewers at the time, some speedruns that was actually there. And by the way, this is also a highlight in a way. I think it was quite, it was, at the time it was cool, this trick with the Yellow Devil that I pulled him off with is it Shadow Blade?
Yeah, the Shadow Blade. Yeah. So
I
this
think it
was known at the time, but it was not commonplace to get that quick kill.
It's Mega Man 3, right?
Yeah, we've moved on to Mega Man 3.
Yeah.
And then this is the first appearance of the commentary team at this point of the marathon. Is that accurate, Mike?
Yes, it is. We had finally gotten commentary set up, the donations processing set up, and you might notice that it's not on the runner, and it's on, I guess, what would be called the equivalent of the host back then. The roles weren't really that formalized back then. And the reason why we did this is because we thought the runner wouldn't be talking very much, and it would be more interesting to have the people who are talking more often be the focus. But then chat was like, put the camera on the runner. And then like a couple of games in, like I think I want to say sometime during the Mega Man X games, we just put the camera on the runner instead. And that's how it became a mainstay.
Well, it's a perfect segue there because this is the first Mega Man X game run. This is Mega Man X as run by Frezzyman back in 2010 at Classic Games Done Quick. And we're going to watch some highlights, but Frezzyman, take us through because I've watched most of the run and there seems like there's some really good gameplay going on. Tell us a little bit about Mega Man X.
If you talk some speedrun history, I know that Mikey Yama, he had the first the record or submitted run for it in 2004. For both any percent and 100%. So I decided I would try to improve it. So I did. So I had the world record or the record at SDA in 2006 for both these categories. And then I didn't play it very much. And then Tiki improved my any percent in 2007. And so I had to grind that game again and improved it. And recently, just some months before this marathon, if I look at the history, Tiki had improved my time even further. So at this point, I was not a record holder, but I was close to it. And I had recently, 2 years back, I had been playing it a lot. So I was quite updated, and at this time, this was a good run. So even if I was a bit rusty, and I watched it last week just to see how it went out, and I could see I was rusty, and we was commenting a lot about some things that didn't go as good as I hoped for. But yeah.
Did the Mega Man X community have around a similar amount of runners that Mega Man? Was there crossover? Nowadays, you might see people running both Mega Man games and Mega Man X games. Did any of that happen? I'm curious about what the community was like back at that time.
I think Mega Man X had been one of the most competitive games early on. So at this point, this record had been improved 4 times already in 2010. So that's quite good with three different runners. So
Mike, were you still running it as well? Were you still actively grinding a bit?
No. I was not. I haven't really actively played Mega Man X, the first one, since 2005 or so. I still really like the game. Maybe someday I'll casually run it, but no. I did, and I do run X3 for this marathon, as you'll see later, and I mostly only ran it for CGDQ.
Prepping us for
I'll explain a bit more once the run comes up, but yeah.
Frezzyman, there's a really good boss fight actually coming up right now, isn't it, Frezzyman?
Yeah. So just some background. I picked up, I think it is the helmet, is it? So that I don't take as much damage as in a world record run. So for a little bit of safety. And it's quite fun because Room Scout is commenting in the run. And when we come to the last segment, this is the second to last fight. I'm very close to dying, and I am confidently saying that I will get it, and I did, but it was close, a close failure. And I think the final time was 36 something, and the world record at this point was 33:50 maybe or something. Yeah, 33:48 by Tiki at the time.
I think that's one of those things too about speedrunning that you've been in that situation before. You've been at that boss fight with very little health. One more hit's gonna end your run. So it gives you some confidence when you're in a situation like that.
Yeah, and I knew that I had a good chance of beating him if I was playing as I used to. But it's strange because you can have bad luck and be very tight with the lasers from his hands here. So.
We have the commentary turned down a bit, but I believe it is Romscout who even says, you're not going to go fight him on the left side, are you? Telling you.
I mean, the left side is the only side. So.
Right.
Yeah, 1 health bar left. So.
One health left. Barely making it through a GG there. And I think that leads. Hey, look, you can actually see Frezzy Man made it on screen. So I think that leads actually really perfectly to the next game we're going to see. So, folks, we're just looking at some of the highlights from the Mega Man and Mega Man X block, if you will, at the first Classic Games Done Quick, which is actually the first block of games. Mike, first you got to set the stage a little bit. What's going on in the marathon, and what's happening by the time you get to your run?
So I remember we had just set up the commentary a few runs ago. I'm still stressed out of my mind. I don't want to run this game because it's funny because I used to like this game a lot way back when I ran in 2004, but I started to dislike it more and more as I started practicing it for this event, CGDQ. I mean, I think Mega Man X3 is a pretty good game, but it's just not quite as good as the first two for a couple of reasons. But the thing about speedrunning this game is that even though it's technically not a hard game, it's kind of an unforgiving game because everything that hits you, well, not everything, but like if you collide an enemy, that's usually like a third or half your health. And so it makes this a bit of a dangerous run. And I just remember I just wanted to get this run over with. And I remember I was not playing that well because I was running on not very much sleep, and I was just still very stressed from all the setup from this event. And so I just wanted to get this run over with.
A lot of pizza, lack of sleep, and here we are.
I don't think I was eating pizza, actually. I was one of the few people who was not eating pizza. Yeah.
Frezzy Man, have you played in the X3 at this point, or have you played through the game? Were you familiar with it?
Yeah, I have played it through like many times, but never speedrunning it, really. Just a little bit for fun, practicing some parts of the run, but I'm not into it a lot.
That brings up a good point. Mike, were you able to practice any of your runs before you performed them here at the event?
I mean, I practiced them, like a week or so before the event. Like I did practice all my runs, but like upcoming to the event, no, I didn't really have much time to practice my runs.
So we're going to be coming up to the boss fight here pretty quick. We're just showing some highlights from the Mega Man and Mega Man X series of games. We're watching Mega Man X3 right now. Tell us a little bit about it's not the final boss fight, but the boss fight where there may or may not be an infamous reset coming up.
Yeah. So when you're doing the any percent for this game, you want to fight Vile. And you want to kill him because if you do that, you will have access to Zero's saber in one of the Doppler stages. And that's very important because the beam saber kills all of the bosses in 2 hits. And so you lose a lot of time if you don't have the saber. And because I was just like not really in a great headspace during this run, I completely forgot about that. And it actually, Frezzy mentioned him earlier. Tiki was apparently screaming in the chat like, Mike, you forgot Vile or something, something like that. And someone related to me. I was like, and then, but I mean, fortunately, the game does save progress through passwords, so you can just reset the game and do that. But I remember being very worried about that, and it was a good thing because that kind of saved the run. I remember this run not being that great.
It reminds in the commentary track, which once again we have the volume turned down a bit just in case. Yeah. But somebody even mentions that they were a speedrunner of the game and they weren't even aware of a password system in the game, and it cracks me up that as speedrunners we sometimes get this laser focused view on the game sometimes, and we forget there are other aspects of the game that at least and Mike had said, oh, there we go, we have a reset.
Yeah, I mean, as I said, fortunately, the game just saves progress through passwords. And if you reset the game, you'll still have the progress saved. So I can just repeat a stage. And I was like trying to think of like the fastest stage to do it in because I wasn't doing it along my usual route. But, fortunately, I was able to do it and do everything and, go through it just fine. But that was definitely not a fun experience when that happened.
I'm going to mention it again, but if you haven't, there's this great panel from AGDQ 2019 where Mike Yama takes you through, and a couple other panelists, Rom Scout, and I can't remember who else was part of that panel, Mike?
It was me, Rom Scout, and Breakdown.
A breakdown, and that if you're curious about some of the history about how we actually got to this point, please do yourself a favor and go watch the panel. But your mom cracks me up because she was talking about people sleeping everywhere and everything. At some point, I assume that y'all got to sleep at some point. Are people just sleeping wherever they can in the house later on? I
mean, some people got hotel rooms at MagFest, so I assume they slept there. And yeah, for like others, they just kind of slept wherever they could. We actually had this run called Piano Toads, where it was Battletoads being run to piano accompaniment, and that had to be done upstairs, which cost us a ton of time. Which cost us a ton of time because we had to move the whole setup upstairs and then have that recorded. And apparently, Breakdown was just sound asleep on the couch while the piano was playing along with Battletoads during the entire run.
And then, it's funny, when you come back, there's some pretty decent boss fighting going on once you got the reset in. So, end of the run, pretty strong.
So the big thing about this boss fight is that you just need to make sure you have enough ammo, that you kill him with his weakness weapon, or else he survives. And the purpose of this is to kill him so you can get the beam saber later on.
Well, it was definitely a memorable moment for sure from the very first event.
Yep.
And we'll keep wrapping it up here as we keep moving through the bosses. It brings me to my next point. Andrew and Frezzyman and Mike, had you all known each other at all before you got together at this first time in live, or was this just by form? I'm curious how you all knew each other and what the communication was like back then.
I mean, as I said before, it was mostly forums, so I hadn't really met them in person except MagFest a year previous. Other than that, it's just all been through the forums.
Frezzyman, go ahead.
Yeah, the same for me. But I you get a little bit of a personal relation with the runners, even on the forum. And I knew that, for instance, me and Mike was talking a lot about when I did my Mega Man X2 run. Because I think I showed some strategies on the forum and no one was really into it at the time. So we had a lot of conversation about that and everything else because Mike had been practicing that game a lot, but he never did a run of it. So that's as an example. And I think we was chatting a lot for some period. So you get to know people anyway. And me and Andre was talking some Super Mario 3 strategies, for instance. I think at one point he learned how you get P-speed early on stage 2, which I used in the record run later. So we had a lot of chat going on as well.
Yeah, I was gonna say I was pretty active on Speed Demos archive forums. I'd say I think I talked with both of you. I think a little bit. I didn't really play much of the same games as you, Mike. But Mario 3 with Frezzyman, what's interesting too is that I followed I'm not a big Mega Man X guy, but at the same time I followed all these runs. I followed the progress of different speed runs, just because it's interesting to me. And so I remember watching these runs and being super impressed, especially the Mega Man X runs and the Contra 3 and everything. So it's kind of I got to, I did get to know them pretty well. I got to know a lot of people pretty well through the forums, but I was also big fans of a lot of the runners because the runs are so impressive.
Absolutely, and I think that is a perfect segue to what's going to be our next and almost done. We're going to have 2 more runs. This next one is Super Mario Brothers 3, and it's a race between Andrew G and Frezzyman. And I guess the first thing I should ask is, What were the categories that existed in SMB3 at this point? Did we have the wrong warp? Did we have no warp missiles? What kind of categories existed for the game?
This is really important right here. I'm really good at dying at this piranha plant.
The classic death of the piranha plant.
So, if you're wondering about that flickering TV, I think that was maybe a webcam pointed at the TV.
The flickering.
So that's why it's flickering so badly. So the way CGDQ was set up, we just had 2 streams running, one for the gameplay and then another for the commentary. So we just used the commentary stream for the second stream. So basically, I think, I'm not 100% sure, we're just pointing a webcam at the second player's screen, and that's why you're getting all that horrible flickering going on.
So this is going to be now known as the any percent no wrong warp category. Did that exist at 2010?
No, it's just any.
This was the only category at the time. Any post? No, it was 100% run as well. And I think I did in this marathon. I did a no warp run, which I think was the first time on the internet someone actually played through the no warp run.
I remember Marshmallow guy who did 1,000,000 runs.
Yeah.
I think he did Mario 300%.
Yeah.
But that's all, I don't remember really many people doing it. I feel like I was actually talking about this before. I feel like any percent for a lot of games was like the main category back then, at least in my head. And nowadays, I feel like it's pressed more towards like the 100% categories.
Yeah, it was. I think many of us thought that way, but also I know that Richard Ureta, he was mentioning somewhere at one point that he didn't want to take the time to really memorize all the levels to play through no warps, and it was similar to me. I was interested in it. It's a fun run to do, but it was a lot of work to memorize and practicing everything.
Yeah, for me, it was actually kind of the same thing. I played through the full game many times with my sister, and it just was such a long run. I was just like, I don't know. I don't feel like doing this.
Sounds like a speedrunner, I lose an interest if it's not, because of the auto scrollers and everything like that, especially for SMB3. Who was the world record holder? Like, this game has quite a history to it as far as world records go, as all do the games that we've been showing today. Who had the world record at this point?
I don't know.
I'm pretty sure it was Fuzzy Man.
I think I had it, but I don't know if it was submitted yet at this point at SDA. I know in October 2009, I think I did my 1048 run, if I recall correctly. So
I'm pretty sure you had the record at this point.
Yeah.
I do remember visiting you, Frezzy, and then you showed me like you had this picture of like how you marked down like all of your 2,000 or so attempts of 80% or something.
Yeah.
Like that.
And I when I was in the sequence break show with Matt, I showed that I have in a frame that paper of all my attempts.
I'm so thankful you shared it, because there's this history that, because not everyone was streaming and things like that, some of this stuff gets lost. So the fact that we have access to some of this, it's just so very fortunate for it. There's actually some really interesting strats that are still even used today that you're doing in this, Frezzy Man. Were there, like we've talked about before, were we sharing strats at this point? Were you discovering some of this stuff on your own? How did you kind of figure out, fireballs and all those kind of things, where to pick it up at the right time for this game?
Me and Andrew had the world records. First I had 11:03, and then by SDA timing, and then Andrew got 11:01, and we talked about the game at some earlier points at least. So he taught me the early P-speed in stage 2, I believe, and we discussed like early P-speed in stage 3, and at this point I knew that he was not running the game because he was focusing on other games, maybe Mario 2, Mario 1. So I had a feeling that I want to do the run of my life, like try it. So I was grinding really hard and discovered some tricks, and I was so much into the game, and I think it would be fun to at one time like post a run without talking about it before. So
Yeah.
I think it was a big news when the run came out. So it was a bit different. So, and I knew like at least how my experience of it was that Andre told me that he was not going to attempt it in a long time before I did this record. So I was a lot into this game, and so it was important for me here. I was nervous because I really wanted to do a good run at the marathon. And I was very satisfied with the outcome here.
Pretty darn good run. Andrew, you're going to say something there?
Yeah, no, I think back in the day, I feel like a lot of times, like people, like it would be fun to surprise people with a run. Like with my 5-minute Mario run, it was kind of like I didn't really tell people I was doing it, and then I just submitted it, and people are like, "Oh my gosh, that's crazy!"
Yeah.
So I understand, like people look at this now and they're like, "Why would you hide the strategies?" It wasn't really hiding the strategy. It was more about like it's making it like exciting and kind of a big
Surprise.
showcase, for the new runs. But the Mario 3 run that Frezzy did was honestly one of the best. The Contra and the Mario 3 run were, for a long time in my mind, like honestly some of the best speedruns on Speedrun's archive. I was like, holy crap, like when you got the 1048. And I had no, I was like, I don't know if I have the motivation or effort to be able to go back to that, but I would, maybe someday.
And about secrets, I don't think there was any, like in this run, the strategies I use, I think that they were known, but no one ever, like, I think, talked of that you could actually pull it off because it was so tight execution at this time.
Keeping piece speed in different stages. I didn't know, like in Bowser's Castle, I didn't really think to. I wasn't very good at the final screen right before Bowser keeping piece speed, and some like all those little things really added up. And I was really surprised by how much time Frezzy was able to save off my time, which was, I was like, holy crap, you beat me by 13 seconds. That's kind of a lot.
And I was surprised myself as well. And the final run was like a little bit better than at SDA timing, I was aiming for 10:49 or 10:50. I saw that coming, that I don't give up until I get that time. But then I got 10:48. It was lucky with all the random things going on as well. And it was, by the standards of 2009, it was extremely good execution, I think. And I didn't know any like more strategies into it either, so that was what I had at the time. But talking about SMP3, I have been looking at the records after me. So there is at first, like Mitch was beating me. He used another wall sit in Bowser's Castle, saving at least 2 seconds, and then a bit different strategy at Bowser that I hadn't thought of, and I think it was the jump over fireball in the first castle in first world that I never thought of. So it was some small new strategies, and then later, if you add the wall jump to that. And I think it was an early P-speed in this stage as well in the new record. But they are pretty much some large savers from my record.
No, absolutely. The game has definitely progressed and evolved, but the foundation, a lot of what you and Andrew are trying to do here is definitely still in place, specifically the P-speed. I mean, that's really a lot of what the game comes down to, is getting P-speed in those right areas to bring this thing up. Races have now a long history at Games Done Quick and GDQs. Did you guys practice any races before you play together? Was this the first time you're facing each other? Like, how did this race come about? Like, can you prep us a little bit? What was going on beforehand?
Can I just add one more thing before
Please,
now?
please. Yeah.
Okay, I'm already on the final boss here, but at this run, Mario 3 run at the marathon, when I was entering the castle, when I did measuring the time, if I could keep the pace of my world record, it would have been a 10:59 run at the time. So it was. I was very satisfied with the time of the run, but I lost 30 seconds in the final boss fight since I lost my fire flower, and as you see here, and also another mistake in the final castle. So I think I lost 35 seconds there. So I think the run ended like 10:35, 10:40 or something. 11:40. Sorry.
Yeah. The race. Go for it.
Yeah, the race, was this the only race at the CDQ, or was it more race going on?
There was a kung fu race, but so yeah, this was one of two races.
Didn't you play Kung Fu, President?
But I don't think there was a race between you two beforehand.
No. Yeah, but this was the first. I think this was the first.
Yeah. I don't even think there was like a dry run or anything like that.
No, this is it.
Sit on the couch and play the game.
Exactly.
We can't see the webcam. Were you both sitting close? Like, did you bring the TVs in there? Were you in the same room? The logistics of how this thing actually happened.
Yeah, they were in the same room, but Frezzy was further off to the left.
Got it. Okay.
Of where Andrew G was, and yeah, there's no way we could have gotten them both on camera.
Right. It's just, there's this really wonderful history of SMB3, and it's still seeing it in its infancy at this point. There are still some really well-defined strats, as you mentioned, having the fire flower, taking it to Bowser, fireball killing. Like, when I played through this game as a kid, I never thought about fireball killing Bowser. Like, that just seemed unreal to me, because it was something like, it was so many fireballs and everything. So seeing it come to and happen in a speedrun it's a really cool seeing where it came from. What did you think? After watching this now back 10 years later, or however many years later, is it crazy to think of where Mario 3 has gone to? Oh, there we go. Got a clip from Andrew. Nice clip. Is it crazy to what's it like to think that the game, where the game has gone to today? I'll start with you first, man. Go for it.
Just like all my records is improved a lot over the years, but I still think that the execution of my gaming in this Mario 3 run I did is still it's very good standard even today. But there is a few tricks added, especially the wall jump in the world record. That is, if you do the run I did and some new tricks, and also the wall jump is a huge improvement. So it's definitely impressive that it turned out with a wall jump. That's quite amazing, and it's interesting and fun to see how it had been evolving.
Andrew, I appreciate you throwing in the clips there when when you know the outcome of the race already.
Yeah, I know. I'm a showman. At the end of the day, I like to. Even if I'm doing bad, I like to at least make it entertaining.
This is so you do this on stream still today. So you lose a run, hey, might as well let's show you what else you can do with the game if the run's already lost. You must have had some practice with these, so you knew those clips were there, right? Those weren't just by accident or anything.
Oh, no, I knew that. I just, like I said, I very much, when I speedrun a game, I know the ins and outs of everything. So that's the kind of stuff I just like to do. That kind of stuff, I can go to Bowser this way. But I was gonna say too, with Mitch's new runs, it's it's insane. The star strategy, I never thought that could ever be a thing. Like I didn't think that would ever be faster. I think I knew about that route because I had looked at some of the level maps, but it didn't seem like that would ever have made sense. Because it's like there's too many enemies, there's like this hills and such, so it didn't seem like realistic at all. So it's surprising that it ended up being faster after all those years.
For those of you that enjoy the SMB3 stuff, there are now runners attempting to put that into the warpless route as well, that clip in the World A Castle. And it's just, as you mentioned, the growth of the game and where it's going and continues to go. As we see it in Contra and Mario 1 and all of these things, it's kind of mind-boggling to think that, humble beginnings from here, where these are impressive runs, and look where they have gone to nowadays. Let's do. Okay, so we're going to move in, folks. This is going to be our last run of the evening, and this is Castlevania. And this one, you just from the very first, frame, you're going to get a chuckle out of it. Let's set the scene. Sorry.
This is not Castlevania.
Richard, do you mind if we switch on to the next run, if that's possible? Richard's our tech here, and I'll see if we can do. We're running a little bit shorter on time, so apologies, Mike. We might skip your TMNT4 run. We might. I don't know.
That's fine.
Awesome. We'll see. While we're talking through that, why don't we go ahead and set the stage? Well, maybe we'll watch a little bit of Teenage Mutant Ninja Turtles here. Okay. Look at that. Richard's giving us the go for it. Mike, set us up for TMNT4. This is awesome.
I remember I ran this at like 4 a.m. or 5 a.m, so I was like pretty tired at the time. I remember I set myself up for like a graveyard shift because like I wanted to, make it so that no one else, no one else had to be in graveyard. But then after passing out for Secret of Mana, I stopped being that noble. So the big thing about speedrunning Turtles in Time is that unlike a lot of beat 'em ups, you can actually skip a fair few of enemies in this game if you're fast enough, especially with your slide, which is your fastest form of movement. And you basically just want to clear the enemies really fast. It can vary how you want to do that, but you generally want to do it with like tackles, specials, or throws.
And was anybody running this game at this time? Is there a scene around the TMNT4 at this point?
The scene was me. I mean, there's definitely more people who run this game nowadays, and this time is like pretty outdated. But
a couple of comments. I remember from your comments from your run that you did in SDA, Mike, that talking about the tests and how do you get strategies and so on. You said that you got from the guy who did the test that all the strategies was skipping some enemies at some places. Is that right?
I definitely got some strategies from there. It's interesting because the tool-assisted speedrun, even back then, like had a bunch of stuff wrong, and it's still there. And it's very outdated by today's standards, but like it did help me in planning this run. Go ahead, Prezi.
Yeah, just another thing about Turtles 4 that I played it a lot of as a kid, but when I'm watching Mike run at the first time, I was thinking of what the heck is he doing? How does he do all these moves? And then you realize you can choose option C when you you can do controller options, and so that you can do this dash in a manual way and do this specials while dashing without losing health. And by doing so, it becomes like a completely different and more awesome game, in my opinion.
So the game defaults to an auto dash, which means you have to walk for about a second or so before you dash, which is really horrible and slow. And I don't know why the game defaults to that, mainly because that's how the arcade game works. And this is one of the few games from back in the day where the console version is frankly better than the arcade version, because of that and some other quality of life improvements. And so because of that, you can do a lot of dash attacks and specials and the like, and that makes this a much better. Oh wow, I can't believe I screwed this fight up so much. I don't remember this at all.
But
Good, Brendan.
Yeah, it's. I get a little bit frustrated at some point. People say this is the greatest or one of the greatest beat 'em ups, but often when you see these guys, at least I have seen like when they are playing and they use the auto dash and they don't change the controller, and I am a little bit frustrated. Like if you change it, it's more of a fun game, even more fun than it was before.
Yeah, because you have more control over your movement.
Yeah, more options, and becomes faster and more fun.
Mike, I've watched you play now years of Turtles games, and what was like your first experience? What got you into playing some of these games, some of the Teenage Mutant Ninja Turtle games?
So I had this game as a kid, and I really liked it as a kid. And the first run on SDA, when it was submitted, it was done with Donatello. And I can understand why it was done with Donatello, because he has long range and his special can hit twice, even though Raphael is by far the fastest turtle in the game. And long story short, I was not a fan of the first run. It was done on normal difficulty, and the guy, I can't remember if he had to continue or if he nearly continued, but like it was something along those lines. And I was not a fan of the run, and so I just decided to completely crush the run. And so I beat it by like 2 or 3 minutes on hard difficulty. And so that's kind of like my history. I'm like, why I got interested in speedrunning this game in the first place is kind of a spite run, if you will. And I did get a fair amount of strategies from the tool-assisted speedrun and just figuring stuff out on my own, because like there wasn't really a whole lot of well-known information, except one thing that was very helpful from the tool-assisted speedrun was that he created a list of damage values for each turtle and like how and the health values of each enemy, so that helped me measure out like how much damage everything takes.
One of the things that I'm really glad that you've included in the first ever CGDQ was a game like this. That's, the brawler or the fighter, whichever how you describe it, because we get to see a lot of those still to this day. And it's interesting. We've talked a lot about the communities that happen around these games, and I still to this day feel like sometimes some of these fighting games don't get the credit, or some of it, they're underrated. They're underrated type of thing. They go under the radar sometimes. And so seeing somebody actually being able to do these, I'm glad that they're still showcased in the events today, because some of these are really technical speed runs going on where we talk about having a lot of people for a run and things like that. I'd imagine a lot of these strategies you've had to discover yourself or with very few people would be my guess.
As I said, someone ran this game before me. Actually 2 people did, but like in terms of actual like organized strats, it was pretty much just me and the tool assisted run, and the tool assisted run had some outdated strats. So I had to pretty much figure it out on my own. I do remember my execution being a little sloppier than usual in this run, just because I was so tired at this point. But the big thing about this run is getting the enemy skips, and there's actually a wrong warp in this stage now, but it was not known at the time. There was a forum post in SDA about it, actually, where like some guy claimed like with his brother or something, that he was able to warp out of this stage, and it sounds like completely fake, but it turns out that's true. It's just a very specific set of circumstances that you have to do to make the warp work, where you just warp straight to the boss. And the big thing is the quick kills, like knowing how the boss AI works and knowing like what attacks trigger certain damage, certain responses from the boss.
I'm not too familiar. I remember the arcade game, playing that as a kid in the arcade. I didn't have a Super Nintendo, so I didn't get a chance to play this game too much. But what are some of the differences between the arcade version and then the port we got on the home console?
Okay, so the arcade version, so like you see how I'm like doing a bunch of slam throws and screen throws? Those are completely random in the arcade version. It's actually RNG whether you get those or not. Which is one of the many reasons why playing the arcade version is so frustrating.
I can imagine.
You only have an auto dash, so you have to walk for a second before you dash. Your specials in the arcade version pretty much kill all foot soldiers in one hit, no matter which turtle you are. But and they don't take up health, but as the trade-off, they also don't really give you invincibility. So if you just get surrounded by a bunch of enemies in the arcade version and you get knocked down, you can easily just get pummeled to death. It's the arcade version's really hard, but it's not really for like enjoyable or fun reasons. It's more just a really cheap quarter eater, which I kind of hate saying about arcade games because there's a lot of well-designed beat 'em ups that, like, if you play them well. By the way, that was a really good Shredder fight. But
and not to interrupt, but that's the screen that would get me to. That was part of the demo. Was you see enemies flowing at Shredder, and you got to play this game. You know.
Also, that Shredder screen is in the sewer. There's no Rat King and there's no Technodrome in the arcade version. The Super Nintendo version has more stages. Also, the boss in the arcade version, in this prehistoric Turtlesaurus stage, instead of Slash, which, makes sense because he's like, like a dumber version, devolved version of the Ninja Turtles, it's this one enemy called Mudman. It was just a giant pile of mud.
Was somebody else, Frezzy or Andrew, going to say something? I'm sorry, I didn't mean to interrupt. No, okay.
I was just going to say, I really like the arcade version, but it definitely was a quarter eater. I remember that.
Yeah, like, you can one credit clear the arcade version, but it's very difficult to do and generally requires a lot of safe strats, and like, it's just very, I don't know. I just don't find it that much fun. And there's a lot of arcade beat 'em ups that I do like that are difficult, but like, you can one credit clear them without being like overly, I guess, conservative or in your play or something like that.
Frezzy Man, you mentioned growing up that you had one of the Turtle games. That was like one of the games that you had. Did you end up ever speedrunning any other Turtle games or anything like that?
No, just Turtles 2.
Turtles 2, okay.
Yeah, first I did a European version and then American record, and so I played it a lot. But then after seeing Mike's run, I got so interested in this game, so I did a lot of like practice, more for fun. So
that's, I think, one of the great things about having a marathon or having an event such as Games Done Quick is that, you see games that maybe you haven't normally seen or you weren't familiar with, and like, oh man, I want to play that. I want to try that. Just hearing somebody talk about it and everything like that. I've had that experience many a times, especially you seeing it live and seeing people do some of these amazing things. Uh-oh, what just happened there? Somebody went down. Oh, okay.
I died right before the pizza.
Oh, right as you were going for it. Got it.
Yeah.
But just throwing the enemies at the screen still sticks with me for this game. It's one of the fun graphical things of it.
Yeah, it is a cool thing about it, and unfortunately, the Genesis equivalent of this game doesn't have it. So this fight is kind of interesting because everyone says this fight is really hard, and it is, unless you set yourself up for back hits, like that. And wow, this is a really old strat, because there's actually a strat that if you do it correctly, he doesn't even flip over. You just slowly take him to the wall and then pin him there. But basically, the way his AI works is that he'll start to do a flip over once he gets to the wall. So like, you just use your most powerful attacks when you're near the wall, and then you just hit him right after he recovers, and then he can't do anything about it.
Have you returned to the game? Do you still run it at all? Still play it at all?
I honestly haven't played it since I did my race at SGDQ 2014. There's been I did a co-op run with Sinister One at an RPG Limit Break at one point. We don't have the co-op record anymore, but we did have the co-op record when we did it. Even though we only had like a day or two to do it, and I had to derust. But I mean, it's a fun game. I might want to come back to speedrunning at some point. I don't know. But like this run, I mean, this was fairly old, and this was before like other people started getting into the game, because like I did improve this run later, like a couple years after CGDQ.
I'm glad you mentioned it because that's another thing that happens at, when we're fortunate enough to be in person and be at a live event is co-op runs. Those things, I mean, they have become a staple of people putting up times, having only having a day to put it together or whatever, and doing something like that. And I don't think we'd have some of those runs that we have unless we had in-person events such as we did back then. So this is
and. By the way, if you're so like that headset that I'm wearing, just as an aside, it actually wasn't working. We thought that's where like the commentator audio was coming from, but it turns out that it was just the webcam picking up everything. So we ditched the headsets like I think like a run or two after this.
That's a good. We talked about it just a little bit earlier, but how did tech even? The streaming thing was very new back then.
Yeah, exactly. Like very few of us had even streamed before, and I just tried it out to do it. And so some of you might remember a program called Flash Media Live Encoder, and it was so basic that basically you would put in a video source and an audio source, and then that was your stream. So to even get this stream, like we had two separate streams, one for the commentary and one for the gameplay. So like it was two separate streams. So it was actually really hard for people to sync the two streams.
I think this is also important too for those of us who are outside of North America. Frizzy Man, we talked about this a little bit. That were you even aware that there were different frame rates and things like that for NTSC versus PAL and all those things we kind of take for granted nowadays?
Yeah, well, it was well known that European games often went running much slower. So I was aware of that, and I had a lot of problem with at the beginning to record the NTSC screen. I couldn't with my VHS record my VHS player. It didn't work, and I bought the DVD recorder that claimed that it could run 60. But it couldn't. I couldn't record it. So I got help from the SDA community in the tech forum, I think, to find a DVD recorder that was actually working to record it. I think I got help there from Nate. Like he was buying one from actually a store and shipped it over to me so I could do the runs.
Mike, you brought this up. That you were working on SDA for quite a long time, for a few years.
Yeah.
What was it? How would you verify runs? I mean, is it something where you had a timer out? Like, because we talked about not having live split. How do you verify a run back in 2010?
Well, we had people who knew the games check them. Like, had people sign up on the forums to check them, and then we'd have people checking them. But for timing, that was just like. I used to primarily do it, and it was honestly kind of a pain because, like, you would find the start of character control because, like, every SDA time was basically timed the same, which is start of character control to end of character control. So you'd find the start point, and then you'd find the end point, and then like you'd subtract the two times, and you'd use a program that can go frame by frame and tell you the exact frame, like Virtual Dub or AV Synth or something like that. So you know the exact time.
Okay, I definitely never got this far to get to see this level ever. I would play this in the arcade.
So this stage is in the arcade version, but it's different because it's just like it's a side scroller like the other stages. You're still on like the hoverboard, but like it's still like a standard beam up stage.
This is so much fun. Who was on the? Were you doing the commentary? You have a headset? Is anybody else joining you for something like this?
I think if I remember correctly, it was mostly just me commentating a bit myself, and then just like other people who are around just reacting. Like commentary was A, way less formalized back then, and B, like a lot of us were just not used to doing commentary, at least during our runs, because we had never, streamed live before. In fact, the guy who was doing our tech for this marathon, Nate, he had never really done a live stream before, but he managed to make it work. So,
well, that's something I'm curious. Were you allowed to submit a run to SDA with any sort of commentary, or was it gameplay only that got submitted?
If you did the commentary, you submitted that separately.
Okay.
So yeah, it was so it was just gameplay only.
It still, once again, just boggles the mind then that you have an event where you got to talk and play at the same time and actually bring some info relevant to the game and stuff like that. So pretty fast.
Wow, this Krang strat is really bad. it's so funny because I was the only person who ran the game. It took me a long time to figure out like a good Krang strat. And you can kill him so that he doesn't even shoot you with the bombs. And there are and there is a much faster strat. And I think the faster strat that I discovered is still used to this day, which is kind of funny.
Well, we can just claim it as marathon safe. I mean,
it is a marathon safe strat. It's just funny looking back at this run and knowing like how some of the strats are outdated. Like even though I haven't touched the game in about 5 or 6 years, but yeah, it's a fun game because it's very fast paced, and unlike a lot of beat 'em ups, you can actually skip some of the enemies. So it just goes by quickly.
One of the interesting points I found from the panel that you presented on Classic Games Done Quick was whether you even considered doing a second event, especially when things were looking a bit dark and you weren't sure if this thing was even going to get pulled off before you ended up at your mom's house. When did you even consider a second event? Like, how did that process even happen to continue doing something like this after this one?
I mean, I remember soon after this one, we were like, yes, we did it. We made it. It was a success. And I remember, even after all the stress and how wild the event was and how it almost didn't happen, like, we're like, oh, that's fun. Let's do it again. So I soon started planning the second one because I knew that more people would want to come and that we'd want to continue doing this. And I didn't have any like grand ambitions for it, but I just knew that it was going to grow and that, we'd try to raise more money the next time. We'd try to raise 20,000 the next time. And we ended up raising over 50,000 next event.
On the second one? Wow. That's like what, more than double. Holy cow.
Yeah, exactly.
That was an ambitious goal. We were like we're not going to get to 20,000.
Andrew, that's a good point. You all were aware that you were coming together for a charity aspect, right? There was that you were trying to raise money for a good cause.
Yeah. So that was a big reason I liked it, but also just because it was a really fun event. Like, especially after the first one, I'm like, I want to keep going to these because this is awesome. I just really enjoy going.
Yeah, I remember for Classic Games Done Quick, I remember your family was there, or at least like your brothers and sisters. Like, I think they were like on vacation with you, or they helped drive you over or something like that. And they were probably just like, "What the heck is going on here?"
So I kind of made the first GDQ sort of a vacation of sorts at the same time. So we were kind of traveling around DC a little bit also. But my family, like my brother and my sister, they are really into video games. My wife's really into video games. I'm still with Laura, who was actually at the first GDQ. No, my family, they're really into they like video games too. Not like I do, but they certainly play, and so they didn't really mind it. Like, I think most people's families would be like, no, I don't want to do anything like that. But it worked out pretty well.
That's a really great point, Andrew, because Frezzy Man and I have talked about this. He's got kids now. He's got a family. Hasn't been speedrunning in quite a while. Have you shown your kids any of these old speedruns or any of these marathon appearances, Frezzy Man?
Not the marathons, but it's quite funny. They play a lot of Super Mario and other classic games here, and they like it. So, and my 3-year-old is grinding hard. New Super Mario Bros. Wii. So it's so much easier. But my kids have been asking more that, why never you told us you had the world record? And then they had to show their friends the Guinness World Book book of world records without watching and so on. So, and they have been watching like very recently. They are 8 and 10 years old now. Some runs. So, yeah, a little bit.
I shouldn't be surprised, but one of the things I always assume, oh man, these games are 30 years old. I can't imagine kids with all of the games we have nowadays would at all be interested. But Frezzy Man and I talked about this, like good gameplay is good gameplay. If a game is fun to play, it's still going to be fun to play 30 years from now, as evidenced by the popularity of games done quick as it currently exists.
I mean, there's a lot of games that, haven't aged well, but, for like some of the older games, you'll occasionally get runners who are younger than the games themselves for these older games. And even though they do generally tend to gravitate, older games do generally tend to be older communities. You still get the occasional younger people who are entering these communities. I remember Resifos, the Super Mario World runner. Like, I think Super Mario World has a good 5 years on him or something like that in terms of age.
And I think Cosmic's the same way. I don't even know. Was Super Mario Brothers? I think he was born after.
Probably closer to 10 years actually.
Yeah.
Thinking about it, but yeah.
And we do have a GG from Mike on TMNT 4,
Thank you.
Super Nintendo version. And I think that's going to bring us up to this. It's going to be the last run, folks. So get comfy. And Andrew, I'm going to let you set the stage a little bit here for Castlevania. Were you speedrunning the game at the time? What's your experience with Castlevania?
So actually, I should have probably mentioned before too, is how you're saying which runs haven't you really done? Well, Castlevania was kind of one of those for me, where I was just like, yeah, I like Castlevania. I can do a run of this. I spent a lot of time on it, but it's like Mega Man 1. It's like I chose a lot of difficult runs. F-Zero on hardest mode, Mega Man 1, Castlevania 1. It's like all these games, just beating them casually isn't really that easy. So going into it, it took a lot of practice. But I enjoyed running Castlevania. Did pretty well. I think I did pretty well up until the very end.
Yes, I remember.
Yes.
This run was very good and very clutch up until the very the very end.
Yeah, the very end. One thing that was really cool about this run was that I think I accidentally grabbed a stopwatch or something, and I didn't have any sub weapon for the death fight, the Grim Reaper fight, I think.
Yeah, you either had no sub weapon or a bad sub weapon for the fight because you accidentally collected a pickup.
Yeah, so everyone was very impressed that I was able to do that one, and I was like, that one, I don't know, I've always been pretty good at that fight specifically, so I was glad to be able to showcase that. But I never really went back to Castlevania after this. I think my best time was high 13 minutes, which really isn't that great.
But all things considered, I mean, we do. It's kind of tough to watch this run and not mention Mike here on the couch, who, by the way, folks, is in the chat right now. Sega Junkie, how you doing? Good to see you. Shout outs. But I'm assuming this was a little bit later on in the night, perhaps. I don't know.
I think this was he's Australian, right?
Yeah, different time zone. That's fair.
Yeah, so I don't know what time this was. I think he was all messed up from the jet lag and everything.
Yeah, this was I want to say around 8 or 9 a.m. He maybe 10 a.m. He definitely fell asleep sometime during Secret of Mana, which was a 5-hour run, but towards the end, and then he slept through probably another 5 or so runs.
It cracks me up a bit because before falling asleep on stream became a thing. Here we go. We got Mike 89 setting the stage.
It was incredible to me that he could sleep through all this, especially people screaming.
That's the thing. There's quite a lot of sound going on. Yeah.
Yeah, and he slept for a good 3 or 4 hours. It was a not insignificant amount of time. But I think we're just all exhausted and just happened to fall asleep right in the couch.
I think at one point I just asked him, I'm like, "You sure you don't want to move somewhere else? Like, is it like, like no, I'm good."
That was the polite way to ask. Hey, can you? Oh, gotcha. Right. There's just so many people. Yeah, I totally understand. That being said, I mean, we're not halfway through the run, but I can't see what stage we're in. But you haven't died yet. I mean, we're at the what do you call this fight?
Yeah, this was a solid. I feel like I remember this being a really solid run, and then the end happened. That was just terrible because when you die, if you die to Dracula, it's like, well, in this one at least it's a little bit forgiving because you can get all the sub weapons, but like it makes it significantly harder if you die at Dracula.
Now I'm curious. Did you decide? I mean, did you continue on? Did you decide to, after you did this run, to play a little bit more Castlevania, speedrun it at all? Is it something that you took on?
I kind of stopped after this. Well, I guess it's kind of like Mega Man 1, the same thing, where I have speedrun Castlevania 1 and Mega Man 1 for forever, basically, but I've never really sat down and considered them like an actual project. Like a typical project that I would do. They were just they were more casual speedrun.
There are definitely places where we're stopping.
It's kind of funny because my first time attending a GDQ event, I just assumed nobody got any sleep because the marathon goes on 24/7. And nowadays, Mike, I got to tell you, it's all, if you volunteer or anything, it's all very well shifted out. And so you don't have to you don't have to fall asleep on a couch somewhere,
Yeah, exactly. Like, I mean, back in earlier GDQs, volunteers was like, who's willing? It's like there was no formalized process, because even if we had a formalized process, like, it would just be the same people anyway. So,
I think too, it was hard with we were all doing like 10 runs and doing them at different points. So we were like awake, asleep. But it all worked out well. Just, I know that I ended up like sleeping on the floor at one point. And just, I'm gonna sleep on this hard floor. This is fine.
There's some chat about this in the chat, and Frezzy Man, you mentioned that you have a games list from 2010. Is it something that you kept like an email or a spreadsheet from, or how do you have a games list from this time period?
Sorry, what game?
No, I'm just curious. How'd you get a game list? Like you mentioned, one of the ways that I was able to put this episode together was a games list that you were nice enough to share. How did you have a games list still from this time, from CGDQ?
I found it somewhere about the schedule of the event, you mean?
Yeah. Was it just like written down on a hand piece of paper, or how did you all even just share the info?
I think it was somewhere on SDA or something, the schedule from the first event. So it is there somewhere. And you can actually download it as an Excel file. I did that.
There we go.
Yeah, and it's also a list of all the... Oh, sorry, it's the last boss fight.
I know, it's mummies. We're getting closer. I was going to say, Andrew, still haven't died yet, by the way. This is pretty good.
Yeah. Like I said, this run is quite good up until the final boss.
Yeah,
great.
Of course, I always choke at the end.
One thing about doing a marathon like this, like I was organizing the first European Speedster Assembly, and it was the same thing there as in Classic Games and Quick, that all the people that is actually there and involved in the marathon are so interested and focused on helping with everything. So that's just great when Mike was organizing this event and I did organize the European Speedster Assembly. It was so many community members that was so much involved in planning and doing. I tried to do a Gantt schedule of our first event just to get everything organized, but we just screwed it because people said that I can be awake for 24 hours, 36 hours, no problem. We get to run everything.
Mike, your mom mentioned that at the panel, that how nice everybody was, and it seemed like everyone was trying to pitch in and just make this thing happen. It sounds like that was definitely something that was happening at the first one.
I mean, a lot of people were helping out and pitching in, as much as they could, just because we had invested so much into this, and we wanted to see it through. And I guess those two people who thought this event was going to fail were wrong, because it's still going on 10 years strong.
Now we have Castlevania blocks of games at the
yeah,
games
exactly.
Rhythm going.
Were any other Castlevania games run at the first one?
No, there was going to be Simon's Quest, but so this was one of the only marathons where we actually cut games, because we were running. So scheduling was new, and so we didn't really have setup times baked into the schedule. So and some runs were going over estimate. So
he's ending each stage with his
we were. So on top of starting late, we were starting the bleed time that way. And so we ended up ending the marathon at least 6 or 7 hours late, I want to say. And this was with cutting games. And so, so we were originally going to have Simon's Quest, but I cut it. And one of the reasons why it was cut is because I honestly don't really like Simon's Quest. I think it's kind of boring.
Oh my god!
In fact, I there's a video of me, a backstage video on some Trihex alt account. It's I'm not even making that name up, by the way.
No, that's the real name. Yes.
I could maybe find the YouTube link sometime. Is that a backstage video of me saying what game I'm going to cut? And I think I said I'm cutting Castlevania 2 because it sucks or something like that.
So you're saying there wasn't a committee of people not associated coming up with the game selection process? Was basically you? Saying,
yeah, I mean, it was me. And the thing is, it wasn't even much of a selection process, because it was there were very few runs we rejected because, and I think it was because it was a more modern era game being played or something like that. We accepted almost, I accepted almost everything, because I was I don't know if we'll have enough games. It turns out, we had plenty of games, and, but you don't know for your first event how it's going to go.
Right. I think we're getting closer to the death fight. Is that what's coming up next? And
yeah. So what happens is that Andrew G lost the holy water, or boomerang, probably the holy water, and so you really want to fight death.
Yes.
With the holy water, so that he's just unlocked in a place. And having an axe is okay for clearing out some of the sickles, but it's nowhere near as good as the holy water. And death does 4 damage, and so he will kill you in 4 hits.
Right, it doesn't take much.
Yeah, exactly.
Andrew, what was your grind leading up to this? You mentioned that you'd played it a little bit, but were you able to get in a couple of practice runs before you actually did this one?
I would say I did get to be pretty consistent at this run. I spent a considerable amount of time with Mega Man 1 and this game specifically, because they're just they're kind of notoriously difficult games, and also really, popular games. But I had gotten this down pretty well, but I was still really nervous about a lot of these fights, especially here. I was freaking out. This is bad.
I don't know if anybody remembers their first casual experience with this game, but this fight took me over an hour.
Yeah, it's
I don't think I even got hit on this.
Yeah,
I remember.
It is a very difficult fight if you don't have the proper weapons. Also, getting that axe drop definitely helped out a lot.
That's just. Even that, Andrew, that's some impressive recovery there. I mean, that's avoiding those sickles is super challenging.
Yeah.
That was it. I remember being really happy with that. I was like, okay, good. Okay, good. I'm past. Yes. I thought I was past.
Well, typically, yeah, that would be absolutely.
I'm like, okay, I'm good now. But final boss had other plans.
Well, it's definitely a game that keeps challenging, and I think that's one of the cachets around Castlevania, especially the NES versions. That these games, whether you're even they're tough speedruns, they are tough casual games. They really are a game that challenges you. But I have always kind of felt that it's a pretty fair challenge. It's just a real big. You have to learn the game and learn how to play it properly.
Yeah, and you have to think a lot before you do your moves in this game, which I think makes it interesting in a way also.
Because you have the committal jumps.
Yeah, you can be frustrated about them, or you can actually think they're quite fun. Like you have to plan your moves all the time.
That's a really good. That's a really good point. Oh, I'm sorry. Go ahead, Andrew.
I always call them Donkey Kong jumps.
Well,
Can't stop when you do it.
I'm curious if all of you have. My experience with this game was this game in my development as a speedrunner was like I can't just mash the buttons. I can't just brute force this game. I literally have to learn how to react and how to do proper inputs at the right times to be successful in this game.
Yeah. And it's also to mention some kick-ass good music.
Yes. I mean, still to this day, that's another thing. So one of the things I've heard now so many speedrunners talk about, though, is that if you're going to play a game, you might want to learn like the soundtrack to it because you're going to be resetting a lot. And if the soundtrack is a good one, it's going to help out quite a bit, making that reset just a little bit nicer. Okay, so here we come. So we're facing Dracula. What makes Dracula challenging, Andrew? Like, why is Dracula such a tough fight in this game?
You know, I actually had something. I was really stupid, actually. I still kind of don't remember how to even do the final form of Dracula correctly. But I'm pretty sure I don't know how to do it right.
If I remember correctly, you actually had this fight down on your first attempt, and for some inexplicable reason, I think you jumped into Dracula.
I know what I did. I know what I did is I was trying to adjust, and I did a little tap, but then I hit jump. Like I just tried to jump straight up, but I was also trying to adjust, so I jumped right.
Oh, okay, yeah, maybe that's it.
But you can double hit him, right, with the whip if you time it.
Oh yeah. I never got good at that.
Yeah,
I never got good at that. Like I said, I didn't really do like serious speedruns for this.
Not knowing
I feel like I didn't know how to do this fight properly. Or maybe that's right. Is that right?
You're trying to do the Cookie Monster, fight.
I feel like I did it randomly. Like holy water, whip, I don't know.
Yeah, and then you just jump into the boss, and that's
good times.
So sad. You were on the right track. Figured it out there, though.
I don't even remember. I think I died again, didn't I?
I think you died twice before you beat the boss.
Everyone get comfortable. Refill that coffee if you're.
Yeah, exactly.
Apparently, Mike 89 didn't. Oh, whoa, okay. There's a little bit of life.
No, I don't think he gets up until Ghosts and Goblins.
Got it.
And then me and Mike, we went to New York after this event together. It was
nice. Fun traveling. We're getting closer to the end of this run and the end of the show today. I'm curious. I'm going to go around the horn here. Andrew, tell us what are some of the things like. What's one of the big takeaways or some of the big memories you take away from this first Classic Games Done Quick?
It was just really cool to. I mean, we had met some of the people. I had met some of the people, at MagFest. It was really nice to meet a lot of runners. Especially Frezzy and Mike. I always consider both of you very, very talented runners, and it was nice to meet you both. Just I don't know, it's just fun to have the experience of sharing a hobby that we all enjoy and having some fun and raise money while we do it. So I'm glad that it turned into what it did ultimately.
Frezzy Man, how about you?
Yeah, the same with Andrew. Nice to meet him. I mean, it was the record holder of Super Mario Brothers 8 1, and Also, it's so many things in this marathon and this meetup that was so great. Like meeting everyone, people that you meet them for the first time. Everyone is so involved, and all the discussions going on at the backstage, and it's to see this marathon like work out with everything. And it was a lot of viewers and a lot of donations, and the effort that Mikey Yama put in this, like I had to support him and share him on during the stress the first days.
Thank you. Actually, you gave me some of the best advice ever. So when I received the bad news from MagFest, that we basically wouldn't be having internet, and the Wi-Fi modems they gave us didn't work. And I was in such a bad mood, and it was easily the worst New Year's Eve and New Year's that I've ever had. You gave me really good advice when we were driving back home, and that was take a beer and go to bed.
Perfect.
You were
I was like, yep, that sounds good to me.
Yeah, you were so stressed.
I was so mad. I was so mad. Yeah. And I was incredibly.
Yeah, I remember. Yeah. I felt bad. I felt like I wish I could help you out with, the schedule and everything.
Hey, I mean, you did your runs and you helped participate in the event, so it was a good event. Sure, there's a lot of stress associated with it, but there's also a lot of good memories and a lot of a new type of event experiences being formed. So, can't complain too much, especially with how much it's grown since. It's evolved a little bit since then. We might have, things that actual like proper resolutions and timers and, stuff like that on the screen layouts. But speaking of viewers, there was actually a story that I did want to mention.
Please.
So, during my Gunstar Heroes run, we actually peaked at around 1,500 viewers. So thankfully we're on Ustream, so we weren't booting out viewers from outside the US. But what ended up happening was that, like, for whatever reason, Ustream started crapping out. And for those who don't know what Ustream is, it was the streaming service we used back then, because Twitch didn't exist back in the day. And it started just booting viewers, and we didn't know why. And so some people started like using live stream to restream our stream, but live stream had a cap of 55 viewers unless if you were a verified streamer on there. So like then some people were having trouble watching the restreams of our stream, and we don't know why. Like some people could watch our stream just fine, and others couldn't watch it. But like I just remember during our viewer peak, like Ustreams just started crapping out, which is really weird because we had seen streams on Ustream that had over 1,000 viewers that it handled just fine.
Right.
But we don't know why. And just to reiterate on the 1,000 viewers thing, so the other streaming service was Justin TV, and we picked Ustream because on Justin, either the overseas servers were non-existent or they were really bad. So if you had over 1,000 viewers on Justin TV, they started booting everyone outside of the US who was watching the stream because they just couldn't handle it.
Jeez. And I think that's an important takeaway here, folks, for this whole thing. And we wouldn't be where we are today had some of these things not happened, early on in 2010. And one of those things is streaming and trying to get this thing online and getting people to watch. Mike,
yeah.
You mentioned it that you knew that this had to be live stream. That's one of the reasons you perhaps getting stepped away from MagFest, and I think that's such an important aspect. We wouldn't be able to sit here and have this discussion. If that hadn't happened.
It's funny because at the time I was very stressed, and thought, oh no, this is going to work at MagFest, but like we went over it like right after the marathon, and it was actually very fortunate we didn't take place at MagFest because it's very, very loud in the MagFest gaming rooms. Right. Like if you've never been to MagFest, like there's tons of arcade machines, including like Rhythm and Bimani. So like they're just like spinning the buttons or stomping like on the machine. So like you can hear them like from all the way across the room. There's constantly people yelling, like the games are really loud. There's also would have been like logistics issue with taking like on-site donations and off-site donations, and And like, what was nice about doing it at my, in my mom's house was that like we could control the atmosphere. It was like it was more cozy. We could get it was more intimate, and like it just had the right atmosphere. And that's why even for our larger GDQs, we've always had a couch just so it and obviously it's not going to be the same thing as CGDQ, for better or for worse. And I think mostly for better, to be quite frank. But like, to just keep that, chilling out, having a good time, sort of.
I got to say, for all of you, Andrew, Frezzy Man, and Mike, there's been quite a bit of love out there in the chat as the stream has been going on. I'm not sure if you've been able to have the chat up. But Andrew, I'm going to start with you as we start to wrap this thing up. And looking back at the very first classic Games Done Quick, any chance you still speedrun today? Is this something, are you going to keep doing this? Do you enjoy it? I mean, this is kind of a journey you've been on now. I mean, over a decade now, coming up probably closer to a decade and a half, 2 decades. Is something you want to keep doing?
I've been doing it for a long time. I'm probably going to keep doing it, but I actually am having a baby soon.
Hey,
okay.
Congrats.
So I'm going to probably take a break for a little while, but thank you. In a few months. So probably going to focus on that for a while. But
yeah, that's a good idea to focus on the child. It's slightly more important than speedrunning.
Big deal. But I think I'll still be around. I love the speedrunning community, and it's been a big part of my life at this point. So I don't see myself really leaving. I'll be around in some capacity. So.
I'm glad we have these memories of so many wonderful accomplishments in Mario 1, but also in a ton of other games, Excitebike being one of my favorites. Frezzy Man, how about you? People, there's been a lot of questions in the chat, specifically kind of aimed at you about haven't seen you in a few years. We've talked about a little bit, done the family thing. Do you ever get the itch again to speedrun?
After Classic Games Done Quick, I think my life has been like a tornado in 10 years. So I've been with the kids and doing studying. I did a master degree in the university and got a career going. And we built a house and so many things that's going on. But I think and I hope like in the future, I will in some way or another be around or do some kind of speedrunning. I don't know if I would like to do it, aim for a record or anything, but my daughter wants me to play Mario 3 again. So, but it depends so much on the family situation and everything. What do the kids want and how to support them? And it's hard to get to going deep into speedrunning something when you only play like a few hours every second month. But I try to enjoy life and it's sometimes being just for the moment, what do you want to do? And then speedrunning always pops up in my mind. So, yeah.
Mike, we've had some really impressive donation totals. Even as the event has gone online, I've been blown away by some of the numbers we're still getting.
Yeah.
Is GDQ going to see? There definitely sounds like there's a future GDQ. Thankfully, that it's going to keep going and everything like that.
Yeah, obviously. But yeah, I mean, for SGDQ this year, we were Matt was being super conservative with 1.5 million. I thought I was going to hit 2 million, and we ended up crushing both of those. And it was still like one of our top 5 GDQs, even though it was online and didn't have the in-person component to it. But yeah, so I mean, I'm glad that this has been this has been going on for a while. I mean, I definitely helped create the foundation for it, but I've had a lot of help along the way. So it's been a good experience.
I honestly can't thank you all enough for remembering back on this time period. And I know jogging the memory from 10 years ago may not always be the easiest thing to do, but it's been wonderful going down memory lane and learning about the community as it existed 10 years ago and where it's come to today. And just to see the foundation that was set and really see the growth of what speedrunning has become today. And it may not have happened had an event like this not happened. Maybe we'd see some of it, but who knows at this point. That this definitely seemed like it laid a foundation for what we might get to nowadays. So pretty awesome. And thank you all for doing this. This has just been great. Okay. Mike, any last thoughts? Last thoughts, anybody?
Yeah, I just appreciate the time you take and have this chat with you, and I'm honored to be here. And yeah, a great time.
Yeah, I had a good time going down memory lane. I don't know if I covered new ground from my panel, but hopefully there was some there was some insight here that I could share from the ye olden days.
It was a lot of fun. I like having and seeing interviews in general. I'm interested in the history of things usually, so it's a lot of fun. And I'm glad to have been a part of Games Done Quick and speedrunning community and where it is now, at least to some degree. So.
And I thank you all once again for taking that risk 10 years ago to make this thing happen. As we wrap this thing up, folks, I want to just mention a couple of things here, a couple of quick announcements before we wrap this up. In addition to Games Done Classic, we have a fair amount of new shows on the GDQ Hotfix happening right here in this stream. And they're going to be happening over the next few weeks, such as Bargain Bin, which is a show all about speedruns for games costing $20 or less. And we also have coming up Speedruns from the Crypt, apologies, a show about spooky horror games. And after seeing some of the demos of these shows, I think you're really going to enjoy them. They look really fun. Stick to the channel here to keep watching some of these new shows coming up. If you've missed any of the shows or want to revisit the past events or anything like that, you can go to youtube.com/gamesdonequick to check out the VODs. If you're watching this on YouTube, please feel free, join us in the live stream. We're here almost every day now at twitch.tv/gamesdonequick or GDQ. Yes, you can say GDQ and not Games Done. Oh, wow. Okay, so you can actually go to /GDQ as well. That's great. And you'll be notified when we go live and things like that. Let's see. Tomorrow at 7 p.m. Eastern, Fleet Fatale's bonus stream. Folks, if you haven't had a chance to watch any of the VODs from Fleet Fatales, more than $81,000 raised. It was an amazing event, and we're going to have a bonus stream, bonus content tomorrow at 7 p.m. Eastern. Please do check it out. Finally, a huge thank you to all of you watching right now, whether you're watching on YouTube or Twitch. This does not happen without people like you. Thank you for supporting, for following, for watching, for donating. All of those things make these shows possible. Thank you so much for doing so. This is going to be a monthly show. Games Done Classic is going to happen once a month, and we're going to keep looking at more memorable moments from all Games Done Quick over 10 years of events now at this point. And we'll be looking back at some of those classic moments with the people that made them happen. Thank you so much. My name is Lat Mackey. Hope you all have a good night. See you later. Thanks for being here. Adios. Bye-bye.